I used to work at Target. This is something that happened back in 2017. Back then, I was a senior in high school and working as a cashier part-time. I would work a lot of afternoon to night shifts, and there were some other people around my age who also worked there. I made a few friends with some coworkers over the months that I was at Target. There was one coworker in particular, though, named Evan. He always seemed kind of strange, and it wasn't just me that thought that. Some coworkers talked to me about some weird things that he would say or strange things that he would do. He worked in another department of the store, I can't remember where, but aside from saying strange things or somewhat creepy things, he would sometimes just stare at people. One thing I noticed in particular was he would sit in his car across from mine a lot. He was around my age, so we would often work similar shifts, and I would always park in the same general area of the parking lot. Many times when I got off of work and walked out to my car, I would get in only to see Evan already sitting in his car, and his car would be facing mine. He would often just be sitting in his car, kind of staring at me. I would usually leave pretty quickly then, and I figured it to be a coincidence at first. I mean, it didn't happen every time, but it did happen quite a bit. One time though, I knew for a fact that Evan got off of work about 3 hours before I did. When I got to my car that night, I was shocked to see him sitting in his car still, and he was staring at me. I quickly left like usual, and he stayed there. I figured that maybe his car was broken or something. I really didn't know why he was often there like that, but I wasn't jumping to any conclusions. One of the next times that I worked though, Evan did not work. Everything went by pretty normal. I think I got off at 9 p.m. and then clocked out and left to head home. During this time, I lived with my parents, almost 10 minutes away from the Target. When I got back to my car, I saw Evan was once again sitting in his car across from mine and looking at me. He wasn't wearing his work clothes and hadn't worked at all today, so I found this to be odd. But like most times, I just started up my car and then left. However, when I left this time, Evan actually left right after me. After leaving the parking lot, I went onto the road and then merged onto the highway. Evan was still following me in his car at this point. I hadn't noticed this happening before, so I drove most of the way home, not knowing if he was following me or not. I mean, I didn't know where he lived. When I turned off the highway though, he did as well. I drove all the way to my street, which was pretty close by. After pulling onto my street, Evan did the same. Now I knew that I couldn't go to my house, so I drove past it. Then, when I reached the end of my street, I turned and went back onto a busier road. I remembered then to go to a police station when you're being followed, so when I got back onto the highway, I put in directions to the nearest one, and Evan continued to follow me all the way there until I pulled in. Then, at that point, I saw him start to turn around on the road in his car. I stayed in the parking lot of the police station for several minutes, and then left to go back home. I felt much better now that he wasn't following me anymore. When I was driving back home, I was careful to look behind me and stuff. I didn't notice him at all. Soon, I had reached my street. When I pulled onto it though, there was this car parked on the side of the road. I saw it start to move after I passed it, and I realized that it was Evan. He must have somehow known this was my street. I didn't know what to do, so I just pulled into my driveway. Then I got out of my car as quickly as I could and ran inside the house. When I got in, I saw Evan's car on the side of the road out front. I didn't hesitate and I called the police. But then, just about a minute later, he left. The police came out and I told them of the situation. I could give them a lot of details about Evan because I knew his name and where he worked. After that, the next time that I worked at Target, I reported what happened to my manager. I learned that Evan had been fired recently from Target for inappropriate behavior, and not long after that, I found out that he had actually followed home another coworker a different time. He had also recently been arrested for stalking yet a different woman. This guy was a total creep. I'm really glad that I don't have to worry about him anymore. I worked at a Target during the time period that I was in college. It was a good job for me, and I would work there when I was back home during the summers. In total, I worked there for 3.5 summers, including several winter breaks as well. I was a cashier, and during the summer, some weeks I would work close to 40 hours, so I was there a lot. During the last summer that I worked there, which I only worked there for part of the summer, I was working a 7-hour shift on a Saturday. The 7-hour shifts or longer would require us to clock out for a 30-minute break, and we would also get a paid 15-minute break as well. I took my 15 earlier, and I would always like to save my 30-minute break for closer to the end of my shift, and would usually take it when I had about 2 hours left. We were really busy, and time sort of flew by as people were going through my check lane. Finally, it was time for my 30-minute break. I turned my light off, clocked out, and then bought some food from our deli area. Then I walked to the break room. We had a door sort of near the check lanes at the front end of the store, and a little hallway that led to the break room. I entered it and went inside to see there was nobody else in the break room besides me. I was a little bit surprised to see this, but was happy, because after ringing up customers all day and making small conversations with them, it was nice to have some peace and quiet. I sat there watching the TV in the break room, going on my phone and eating. About 10 minutes in, I heard the door to the break room open. I looked, expecting to see an employee, but instead, I saw a guy in a black shirt and jeans who clearly didn't work there. He took a couple of steps into the room and then made eye contact with me. After he saw me, he immediately turned around and walked away. I figured he was a customer who for some reason got curious and went inside the door that led to our break room. I expected him to walk back into the store, but after about a minute, I never heard the door back to the store open. I couldn't see the hallway from where I was, so I couldn't tell if the man had left or not. I decided to walk over and see. I walked quietly to the hallway and looked down it. I didn't see the man, but I did hear some small movement. There was one small closet in that hallway, and it was sort of a storage closet. It had random stuff in it, mainly cleaning supplies, but it was also used to store things by cart attendants. The door was sort of half open, and I could see that the man was inside. All I could really see was his back, and I don't think he was supposed to be in there, but I just didn't have the nerve to confront him. Instead, I decided to go out and tell my boss, who was a manager. I walked out to the store and found my manager, Sherry. I told her it looked like a random guy was in the store closet. I watched her walk down the hallway, and less than a minute later, she came out and said she was calling the police. I was pretty surprised by this, and both her and I walked to the front and outside the store. The police arrived minutes later, and it became a whole scene. They arrested the man, and as it turns out, he was a former employee. For whatever reason, he had a problem with Sherry, who had been his boss. Apparently, he was going to attack her and was hiding in the closet. These details gave me the chills and blew my mind at the same time. I'm really glad everyone was okay. Years ago, I worked at Target for a little while. I worked in the clothing department, and it was normally pretty easy. Things wouldn't get busy there like they normally would in grocery, so it was less hectic. I actually started in the grocery department when I was at Target, and then after about a month, I moved to the clothes. Very frequently, I would work closing shifts. We closed at 10 p.m., so it wouldn't be incredibly late, and I didn't mind too much. For the last few hours of being open, things were generally pretty quiet too. On this night in particular, I had some things to organize. I heard the announcements about us closing during the last bit of time that we were open. All the guests that were there made their way to the checkouts and left. I still had some things to do though, so after closing, I figured I would be leaving at about 10:15. So obviously, the clothing section at Target is pretty large, and it takes up a good amount of the store. Shortly after close, I was making my way to another area when I noticed something. There was an area with a wall that had clothes hanging on it with hangers so they would be displayed. At the base of the wall next to it, there was a person laying on the ground. They were mostly obstructed, and I'm surprised that I even noticed them. However, it looked like they were trying to hide. I walked over and asked what they were doing. Then, after a few seconds, they moved. After they got up, I saw that it was a man. He was pretty short and thin and wearing a blue sweatshirt. Very quickly, he walked around the corner behind the display wall. I walked around to see where he went, but he was walking quickly away from me at that point. I called out to him saying that we were closed, but he did not respond. At that point, I took out my walkie and I radioed in that there was a customer still inside of the store, and I gave his description. He was going away from me, and I started to try to walk after him at that point. Moments later, I saw him. He was now standing right in the middle of one of the main walkways in Target. He was just standing there and staring at me. The guy honestly made me nervous. He hadn't said anything at all, and he was acting very strange. I got within maybe 50 feet of him, and then he started to walk in my direction very slowly. I asked him what he was doing, but he didn't answer me. As he got closer, I backed away. I didn't know what this guy was doing. He continued to head towards me at about the same pace. It was really odd. I quickly turned and went away from there to find another coworker. A short time later, I found Monique, who worked nearby. She was walking towards the clothing department and had heard what I reported. I told her the basics of what was going on. However, we did not see the man when we went back to the spot where he had been. Another coworker, Dan, was also on his way over. We searched a little bit of the immediate area, but did not find the guy. However, when the three of us were together, about 2 minutes after that, the man came into view again. This time, he was coming from the sporting goods aisle and was holding a t-ball bat in his hands. We were afraid that he was going to use it as a weapon, so we didn't get too close to him. The man calmly walked towards us, but did not say a word, and he didn't answer any of our questions or commands for him to leave the store. We figured that we had to call the police at that point. So us team members left the sales floor and we went into the employees only area at the front of the store and locked ourselves in. Then we reported the man to the police. All the other employees soon joined us there to get away from the man. The cops got there, went inside, and arrested the man a short time later. We were glad that he was gone and that nobody was harmed. Thankfully, he didn't do any damage to the store either. I'm not entirely sure what his exact plan was, but that was my craziest experience from working at Target.
I used to work at Target when I was in high school. I pushed carts and I really enjoyed the job because I could be outside and get exercise. I was also responsible for maintaining the bathrooms, however, which was my least favorite part of the job. Every hour on the half, we had to go in and make sure everything was in order in the bathrooms. Usually it was, but occasionally I had to refill a soap dispenser or something. It was about 9:30 p.m., so the store was pretty quiet. I went in to check on the bathrooms. I walked into the men's and opened the door to the far stall on the end to check it out. I immediately had to do a double take after what I saw. In the toilet and overflowing from the toilet were electronic security cases. The kind of clear plastic cases that go over video games or memory cards or any kind of small electronics that stores sell. They were in the toilet and overflowed onto the floor and were all over the floor as well. There had to be at least 200 of them. I was so confused I didn't know what to think. At first, I thought maybe somebody in the electronics department quit, and on their last day, they decided to do a prank or something. Maybe somebody stole a bunch of items and left the cases in the bathroom. But how on earth did they get all these cases into the bathroom without being seen in the first place? I walked out of the bathroom and called the store security. He said he would meet me in a couple minutes. I went out and got a quick run of carts and then went back to the bathrooms with security. When I got back to the stall, everything was gone. I couldn't believe my eyes. I felt so stupid, but surprisingly, security said they believed me. I don't know how the cases got there or got out, but I know what I saw.
Last year, I was invited to a little birthday party that my friend Taylor was having. It was just a few people in my friend group that were going. I had no idea what to get at all, and I went to Target after work one day to find something. I'm always really bad at figuring out what to get people. I don't know why, but I've just always been that way. So when I got to Target, I just started looking around at things that could be general good gifts. It was like 9 p.m., pretty late, so the store was almost empty. I'm not really sure how long I was there, but it was probably a while. I did get a couple of things that I actually needed as well, and I got a little distracted by some other items that I looked at. I somehow ended up in one of the aisles in the back corner of the store. I was just looking around, trying to find a good gift, and that's when I started to hear noises. It was just like random noises, like there was somebody nearby. I assumed it was another customer or an employee, but I hadn't really seen anybody in the area, and the noises would have still been strange.
It was like a tapping or random thuds. It went on in what sounded like the next aisle over for a few minutes straight. I got curious and I walked over to that aisle to see where the noises were coming from. When I got to it, I saw that nobody was there. I even walked over to the next aisle after that as well, but nobody was there either. This was really strange. I decided to go over and get back to my shopping, but when I passed by the first aisle that I had looked at, I saw behind a suitcase there was a man. The guy was crouched behind one of the suitcases, and I looked at him for several seconds from about 30 feet away probably. At first, he wasn't looking at me, but eventually he turned his head and we made eye contact. When he was looking at me, he was completely expressionless. It was really strange. I decided to just leave the guy alone. I walked over to a completely different side of the store and kept looking. When I was in that aisle over there, I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. When I looked, I saw the same guy was peeking around the corner. He was just looking at me still. I left the aisle through the other side. I wrapped up my shopping then because this guy was really creeping me out. I ended up just getting Taylor a gift card. I know I'm lame, but when I was at the checkouts buying the items, I saw the guy again. This time, he was standing right by the exit doors. I ended up just getting Taylor a gift card. I know, I'm lame. But when I got to the checkouts and I was buying my items, I saw the guy again. This time, he was standing right by the exit doors. He wasn't leaving. He was just standing there on the side. He also wasn't looking directly at me, but in the area of the check lane that I was at. When I was done checking out, I decided to leave in the other exit doors instead. Luckily, this Target had 2 of them. I really didn't want to walk by that weirdo again. By the time I made it to the other doors and started to walk outside, he was already there. The guy was standing outside, just looking at me. I tried to walk past him and not look at him because I was afraid if I did, he would do something creepy. As I walked past, I was nervous that he would follow me, and sure enough, he did. He started to walk behind me as I went to my car. When I sped up, he did as well. Eventually, I started sprinting. Then the guy was sprinting too. I unlocked my car, got inside, and sped away as fast as I could. Luckily for me, the guy stopped before my car. I'm really not sure what he was doing or who he was. Maybe it was a dumb joke. Either way, it really creeped me out.
I used to be a Target employee. During my time there, the 2 main things I did was to be a cashier and a cart attendant. These jobs are pretty self-explanatory. I enjoyed them both for the most part. Being a cashier was fun and I liked to interact with people, but it could get old fast, so going out into the parking lot and bringing in carts was a nice change of pace. The job had other responsibilities too, and I got to know almost all the other employees from around the store. A big store like Target, though, is always hiring new employees. People come and go almost constantly. One day, I was working a longer shift as a cart attendant. At this time, I had already been working there for at least 6 months. I kept up with the carts pretty well for most of the day, and I did a few other things. At one point, I walked inside the store because things were much quieter now. I went to put some of the baskets in the different areas that shoppers could grab them from. It was then that I saw another Target employee approaching me. He was blonde, and I had never seen him before. I wasn't quite sure who he was, but I assumed that he had just recently been hired. He said hi to me, and I said hi back to him. He then told me that my boss was looking for me. I asked where she had gone, and the guy said that they were on break. He then said he was told to tell me to get some paper bags from the back. I said sure, and he said thanks. This was a pretty common task for me that I would do here and there. We had flats in the back area of the store, and we would also keep the paper bags and other basic supplies there as well. I'd walk to the back to get them. The back room was located along the side of the store and ran all the way along the back as well. The area where I usually got the bags from was in the back left corner. When I got over there, I entered the back to see no flats and no bags in the immediate area. I was a little bit confused. It was very quiet, and nobody else seemed to be back there. This was not uncommon though. I also noticed that the doors leading to outside were open. This was also not uncommon because deliveries would be made sometimes. Also, it would get hot in there occasionally, and at night the guys working back there might leave the door open for cool air. I looked around for the flats, but I couldn't find them anywhere in the immediate area. This was also the only location that I would ever get the bags from. I had never gotten them from any place else. Maybe somebody else had gotten them and didn't communicate that. That's what I was thinking, and I was about to go back to work when I heard a noise. It was coming from near the back door. The lighting was never very good back there. I looked over and saw somebody coming out from behind a box. It was not an employee, but just some guy. Then I heard more noise. This noise was from in front of me, and I looked over and I saw someone else coming out from behind another box. There were now 2 men back there with me, none of which worked at Target. Things were really sketchy. The guys didn't say anything, and they started walking over to me at a fast speed. I asked what was going on, but got no answer. I decided to turn around and run. I ran for the open door, which was in the opposite direction. The men chased after me, and I had probably 25 feet on them to begin with. When I made it to the door, I ran out. I happened to notice a pickup truck that was just kind of randomly parked out there. Somebody was in the driver's seat, and the door opened as I approached. I ran to the side, avoiding it, and then into a random grassy area behind the store. It was an area that I had never been in before. I knew that I needed to get back around to the front, and I sprinted as fast as I could. I heard some men shouting at me, but I no longer heard them chasing after. Still, I didn't stop running, and I sprinted all the way back around to the front. I re-entered the store and finally could catch my breath. After calming down a little, I searched all throughout the store for the employee who had told me to go back there. I couldn't find him though, and he was seemingly gone. My boss was in fact on her break, and eventually I found one of the security guards that we had. I told him everything about what had happened, and the police ended up being called. It was no surprise that the guy who had told me to go back there wasn't actually an employee. This was confirmed to me later that night. It had all been some kind of a setup. An investigation was done, but I'm not aware that they ever found the men. I go to Target all the time. It's the main place where I do most of my shopping. The store has just about everything you could want, from groceries to electronics. It's also nicer in my opinion than competitors like Walmart and Costco. Anyways, this is something that happened last year that caused me to not go there for a while. It happened one night when I went to do my normal grocery shopping. I think I got to the Target a little bit later than I usually do. It was maybe like 8 o'clock at night. When I got inside, I got a cart and started walking around the store getting things. At one point, I remember that I was towards the back corner of the store in the grocery department. That's when I first noticed this one woman that was inside there. This woman was somewhat short, thin, and had long, kind of messy hair. What stood out about her the most was that she was just standing in like the exact corner of the store and staring at me. She didn't have a shopping cart or basket and wasn't holding anything. It just seemed really odd. I was getting something back there, maybe 30 feet away from her. I spent maybe a minute in the area, and when I was leaving, I walked sort of past her. I glanced and noticed that she was still staring at me. This was really weird. I mean, she hadn't really moved at all. What was she doing? As I walked away, I could feel her still staring at me. I certainly didn't know her at all. I moved on to another section of the grocery department. From there, I continued my shopping. Probably 10 minutes or so went by, but that's when I noticed her again. I was in an aisle, and there were a few people scattered around here and there, but I noticed a ways behind me, like 30 feet or so, was the same woman. I didn't really look at her to see if she was staring at me again or not. I really just noticed that she was there. I kept shopping like normal, and was soon in another aisle. I saw the woman there as well. This was pretty weird to me. I still ignored it though, and didn't let it bother me. Soon, I was done shopping. I then walked to the front of the store towards the checkouts. When I was walking there, in a more open area, I noticed that the woman was trailing me. She was remaining a sort of far ways behind me, but was certainly following me. I really didn't know what to make of this. I got in line and waited to check out. When I did, the woman did not get in line behind me, but instead stood just inside of the clothing section, which was adjacent to the checkouts. Soon I was able to pay for my items and then be on my way. I walked out of the store, not bothering to look around and see if the woman was still following me. And I didn't notice her at all until I had made it to my vehicle. I got to my car, which was a smaller SUV. I opened up the back rear door and put several bags of groceries inside of it. That's when I saw the woman again. This time, she was just standing in an empty parking space, which was across and one over from my car. So she was once more maybe 30 feet or so away. I don't know if that's exactly how far away she was, but it's just my estimation. Anyways, I thought for just one brief second about talking to her. I was curious as to why she was being so weird, but I decided not to. I didn't know what she was capable of, and so I finished unloading the things and closed my trunk. Then I walked around to my driver's door and got inside. But just after I got inside my car, I heard the rear hatch open up. I looked back and saw the woman literally climbing into the back of my SUV. I asked her what on earth she was doing. At this point, she started climbing over the rear seats of my car, heading straight for me. It was a terrifying moment. When that happened, I decided to just leave my car. Again, I had no idea what she was planning to do. I took my keys out of the ignition and then got out of my driver's door. Then I basically just ran back inside of Target. The woman did not leave my car and chase after me. When I was safely inside, I called the police and reported the incident to them. I waited inside Target without seeing the woman until the police arrived. When they got there about 10 minutes later, I spoke with them briefly. Then they went to my car to look for the woman. She had left my car, but was found a short distance away, trying to break into another vehicle. After the police had apprehended her, I went back and looked at my car. Overall, it was fine, but inside, she took all of my groceries out of the bags and opened several things. It was really weird. This incident caused me to not go to Target for a while, but I have since returned. I really don't know what that woman's problem with me was. One night a few years ago, I went shopping at Target. It was sometime in the evening, probably around 8 or 9 p.m. When I arrived at the store, I remembered that it was noticeably quiet with not that many people around. I didn't have to get that much stuff either. It was not my usual Target shopping trip of groceries or clothes. I was just getting a couple of things, and I was over on the side of the store opposite to all the groceries, so this area in particular was even quieter. As I looked at a few things on the shelves, I remember noticing someone else enter the aisle. I paid them no attention really, and they seemed to stay at the other end of the aisle just inside of it. I naturally wandered into the next aisle over without even looking at the person. I was just focused on what I was getting. So I remembered that after getting into the next aisle, I realized that the other person did as well. That's when I glanced over for the first time. There was a guy standing there who looked to be in his 30s, and he was wearing a gray shirt and a baseball cap as well. He looked over at me in the split second that I looked at him. After looking back to what I was getting, I saw that the man started to walk over to me. He came closer and I looked at him again. The man then asked me if I knew where the desk lamps were. I told him that I did not know and he should ask somebody who worked there. Now, when he talked to me, something seemed off about the guy. He gave me a kind of bad feeling. I know that might sound crazy, or maybe that's just me looking back and thinking it, but I know that I felt that way in the moment. The man responded by saying that he tried, but he couldn't find anybody around there who worked there, and that he was in a hurry. I personally had not seen any employees in that particular section of the store. The man did not walk away, so I decided to try to help him at that point, or at least point him in the right direction. I stepped out of the aisle, and the man followed me. I looked around, and I thought the lamps were probably a few aisles away near the furniture, so I told him that he should try there. He said okay, and then the man walked away going in that direction. After the man was gone, I continued with my shopping. I was in the same area for maybe 5 more minutes. In that time, I remember the man approached me again. He had a small lamp in his hands, and he told me that he found it. I told him that was good, and I was glad that he found it. But the man did not leave at that point. He then asked me if I could give him a ride. This seemed way random and out of nowhere. Obviously, I was not going to agree to that. I told the man no, I could not give him a ride. Then the man just walked away without saying anything more. At that point, I finished up my shopping, and within a couple of minutes, I headed up to the front of the store. I went to the checkouts to pay, and as I got there, I noticed the man again. He was standing around in the clothing area just sort of looking at the checkouts. He was also no longer holding the lamp that he had been getting. He just seemed sketchy to me, and I continued checking out and buying my items. Then when I was done, I started to walk to the doors to leave. When I was doing so, the thought occurred to me that maybe the man was going to try to follow me or something. I decided that I should move quickly. When I made it outside, I literally started running for my car. I made it inside my vehicle, and I was not really parked that far away from the doors, thankfully. Then I looked over to Target. About 15 seconds after I started looking at the Target doors, I saw the man walk out. He was not holding anything, so I guess he didn't buy the lamp. Then he started walking through the parking lot. I could have just left, but I was curious to see what he would do. His behavior had seemed pretty strange. The guy walked up the aisle of cars, 2 away from mine. Then he turned and started to walk back down the aisle that was next to the one that I was in. He was looking at almost every car. It made me think that maybe he was looking for me. The parking lot was nearly empty by now, with just a few cars scattered around. I decided that I should probably leave. I started my engine and the lights came on. The man, who was about 50 yards away probably, looked over at me. Then I saw him turn and start jogging in the other direction. I put the car into drive and started to leave. As I made it towards the exit of the parking lot, I saw where the man was running. He was going to his vehicle. I watched him start to open the door to an old beat-up pickup truck parked in the back of the lot. I quickly left and then made another quick turn to get out of there. Then I went home. There was really no way that the man would have been able to know exactly where I went, and I'm glad that I didn't see him for the rest of the drive home. I think, though, that given the chance, he would have followed me. I'm not really sure what exactly the man's plan was looking back, but I'm glad that I got away from him. I used to be a manager at a Target for a few years. I actually worked at the Target for a long time. I started as a cashier in high school and then worked there part-time in college. The degree that I got in college helped me to become a manager, but I also moved up over the years. So I knew the store very well, and at the time of this story, I had been working there for 8 years. I was working one night on a seemingly normal Thursday. It had been pretty busy from about 5 p.m. until 7, and now that it was a little bit past 7, things were starting to quiet down. I was watching over the check lanes among other things, and then I received a call about something. It wasn't very clear about what exactly was going on, but I immediately headed to the aisle that I was told to. When I got there, I saw that one of our team members, Chloe, was there, as well as another team member, Tim. There was also a man with them who was a guest, and the 3 of them seemed to be having a disagreement. When I got there, Tim said that the guy was harassing Chloe and following her around the store. The man instantly started denying it and was really aggressive. Chloe was also saying that the man had been following her around, and then the man started shouting over them. I went over to the man, and I asked him what was going on. He started cursing at me almost immediately. It was clear that I wasn't going to be able to have a conversation with this guy, and at that point, I asked him to leave, which he did not take well. I told him that I was going to call the police if he did not leave immediately, and he finally started walking away, heading towards the front of the store. Several other people standing around were all staring at us. I followed the man all the way to the front of the store. Before leaving, though, he stopped and cursed me out almost at the top of his lungs. I couldn't even really make out everything that he said, but basically, he was just saying that he didn't do anything wrong and how dare we accuse him. He went on to say that I was terrible at my job and that he was going to sue me and a bunch of other stuff. At last, he finally left. I had come pretty close to actually calling the police on him. After the man left the store, it was a huge relief, and I then went back over to Chloe and asked her about the situation. She told me that when she was working, she started to notice this guy staring at her from a ways away. After she saw him looking at her for like 30 seconds straight, she moved. He then moved and got closer to her. Then she said that she moved aisles about 4 more times, and each time the man moved with her. He didn't even seem to be doing any shopping. The man then approached her in one of the aisles, and she questioned him why he was following her. He denied it, and that's when Tim, who was working nearby, overheard and tried to intervene. Tim said that he even noticed the man walking down 2 aisles after her and was wondering what was going on. It sounded like this guy was just a creep. After speaking with Chloe and Tim for about 10 minutes regarding the situation, I got another call. This time, it was from our cart attendant who was working out in the parking lot. He said somebody was speeding around the parking lot recklessly. I then headed up to the front of the store and met our cart attendant just inside the doors. We looked out, and there was a car going up and down the parking aisles at a speed way too fast. Thankfully, it was later at night, and nobody was out walking to or from their cars at the moment, but it was still extremely dangerous. I could hear the tires squealing as the car went down one row and then up the next. It was like he was doing laps around the parking lot as fast as he possibly could and making sure to hit each aisle. I called the police right then and there, reporting a reckless driver in the Target parking lot. The police were on the way, and I watched from the exit doors and stopped any guests from leaving the store until the car was gone. Even though the store wasn't very busy, pretty soon there was about 10 people waiting around the doors watching this maniac. Then, when he was going up one of the aisles, he appeared to lose control and he crashed into a parked car. It wasn't that bad of a collision, and nobody was inside of the other car, thankfully, but after hitting it, the man's car skidded forward a bit and then came to a stop in the middle of the aisle. The driver's door then opened and a man emerged. Big surprise, it was the same guy who had been following Chloe around. I was shocked, but also not surprised at all at the same time. The guy then took off running out of the parking lot towards the parking lot of a nearby restaurant. The police got there shortly after. Several of us spoke to officers as other officers searched for the man. They caught him a very short time later. He turned out to be drunk and must have went on that joyride out of spite or something. I really don't know, but he seemed crazy to me. I'm just glad that the police caught him so he couldn't do any more harm. As a 22-year-old Target employee, I led a pretty normal life. But the experience I'm about to tell you caused me to quit my longtime job there. It all began with a mysterious person who seemed to be following me every day at work. At first, it was nothing out of the ordinary. We get a lot of shoppers, as people make a habit to get groceries for themselves every single week, so I did see a lot of the same people. But this man looked to be somewhere in his mid-30s, and I had never seen him before. He had a healthy build, but only wore a half-zip button-up and normal blue jeans, and he started to appear more frequently. At first, he would come in and purchase food and leave, so I was never concerned about him. But then, as days went by, I had noticed that he would show up during all of my shifts and simply wander around the store without buying anything. I also couldn't shake off the feeling that he was watching me, because every time I would glance over to him, we would make brief eye contact, and then he would instantly look away. On Sunday, during the same week, he kept showing up. The man showed up not once, but 3 times during my shift. He loitered around the aisles, sitting on corners and stealing glances in my direction. This was a huge red flag to me, and at this point, the man is definitely stalking me, so I decided to keep an eye on him at all times, no matter where I was, and was even planning to tell my store manager the next day if he showed up one more time. One evening, I decided to tell one of my coworkers about the creep. I walked up to my coworker Sarah, and I told her everything about how I was worried for my safety. Sarah asked, "Have you talked to anyone else about this? Maybe a manager or security?" "Not yet," I replied, feeling a bit dramatic about the situation. I wanted to see if he would show up again today. If he does, I'm definitely going to talk to our store manager tomorrow. As I stood at the checkout counter, Sarah approached me with a concerned look on her face. "He's back again, isn't he?" I nodded. "Yeah, I've been watching him. It's starting to freak me out." Sarah squeezed my arm reassuringly. "Listen, after work today, I'll walk you to your car. Don't worry, I'll make sure you're safe." Relieved to hear this from her, I responded, "Thanks, Sarah, I really appreciate it. I just want to feel safe again." Almost immediately after me and Sarah had our conversation, the man approached me while I was working at the checkout counter. He approached with a smile. He invaded my personal space as he said, "Hey there, how's your day going? Enjoying your time working here?" I felt a knot forming in my stomach as I tried to maintain my composure. "I'm just doing my job. Can I help you with something specific?" He had a huge smile on his face and seemed to be extremely pleased that he was finally talking to me. It gave me the creeps. "You're such a dedicated worker. I'm curious, when do you usually get off from your shifts? I might have some free time, and it would be nice to meet up." My heart raced, but I stayed calm. I took a step back, creating some distance. "I'm sorry, but I can't give out personal information like that. It's against store policy. Can I assist you in anything else?" He continued to press me with more questions. "No need to be so guarded. I just want to get to know you better. Tell me, do you live around here? It would be convenient for us to spend more time together." My anxiety slowly turned into anger as I just wanted this creep to leave. I said one last time in a more demanding tone. "I'm not comfortable sharing personal details with strangers. Please respect my boundaries and stop asking invasive questions." Ignoring what I just said, he leaned over and whispered to me, "You're making it difficult for us to connect. But don't worry, I'll find out where you live eventually." He then got up, smiled, and walked away out of the front exit as if nothing had happened. Later that day, as we made our way through the empty parking lot, me and Sarah were looking around to see if the man was anywhere near, but there was no sign of anyone. Only about 7 cars were in the entire parking lot. Sarah noticed my unease and said, "Stay close to me, we're almost there." As we made our way through the empty parking lot, I started to feel like he was still there, so I hurried to my car. Just as I finally got to my car, I put the keys in the door and unlocked it, when all of a sudden I heard scuffles from behind me, and the man was grabbing me from behind. He had Sarah in one hand by the arm, his hand clamping tightly over my mouth. I fought back as best as I could because he was 10 times stronger than me. In that moment, adrenaline fueled my instincts. I remembered the pepper spray I kept in my purse for emergencies. I managed to reach for it just in time, spraying a huge stream of liquid right into his eyes, and he released me and Sarah. For some reason, in a moment like this, my first thought after was to kick him in his vulnerable area. I was a soccer player in college, so you can already imagine the pain that I caused this stalker, and he fell to the ground in agony. We wasted no time, and we both sprinted to my car, heart pounding in my chest, and sped away from that target. I was shaking from all of the adrenaline, and Sarah and I dialed 911 to report the incident, praying that help would arrive before the man left. The police launched an investigation, and soon enough, they caught the man when the video footage from the store's security cameras revealed his identity. The police were able to track him down. It turned out he had a history of stalking and harassment and was taken to jail, as well as a restraining order and being banned from every single target.
From the time I was a junior in high school until my freshman year of college, I used to work at Target. My job that I had was a cart attendant, which means I would walk around the parking lot and bring carts back into the store. I did some other stuff too, but that was basically it. It was a busy Target that I worked at with 2 entrances, so I would always be busy, especially on weekends. On one night, it was a weekday, and it had gotten pretty quiet. I was working a closing shift, which went until 10 p.m., and typically the last hour and a half or so would be really quiet. I was inside doing a restroom check, which was another one of my responsibilities, and then I refilled some of the shopping baskets inside the store. When I was done with those things, it was just about 10, so I went back out to the parking lot for one last time to collect all the remaining carts and bring them in. There really weren't many at all, maybe 10 total carts, but they were spread out across the entire parking lot that we had. I went out and got them all, and as I was in the far back corner of the parking lot, I noticed there was one last cart in the way back. It was literally the very far back corner, and it was pretty far away from the store. I started to walk over to it, and noticed that there was one car parked close by. The parking lot was almost completely empty, besides the 20 or so cars that belonged to employees that were all parked in the back middle. This one was farther away, and I didn't think anything of this particular car until I realized that there seemed to be somebody in the driver's seat. I saw this as I was getting closer. The car was a sort of dark SUV that was relatively big, but I'm not much of a car expert, so beyond that I'm not sure. I had to walk right in front of the car to get the cart, and as I passed by the front of the car, I saw the lights suddenly turn on. I was a little spooked at first by this, but then I just got the cart and started walking back. I glanced over to the car and noticed that the driver was staring at me with a really angry look on his face. I thought this was pretty awkward, and I walked pretty quickly back to the store and put the carts away. I don't know why the guy would be mad at me, but from there, I clocked out of work, then left the store and walked to my car. I always pretty much parked in the same spot in the back middle of the parking lot. When I was approaching my car though, I now noticed that the car that I had just seen a few minutes earlier was parked directly next to me. This was sort of strange, and I did my best to ignore it and got inside my car. I then started it up and left as quickly as I could, because I didn't want another awkward moment with the guy. But as soon as I did, the car left as well. It didn't take long for me to realize that I was being followed by this guy. Every turn that I made, the car behind me would make as well. As I got close to home and had to take the exit from the highway, the car did the same. I didn't want to go straight home, so instead of turning on my street, I kept going, and then I went into another residential neighborhood and I planned to just drive around. I wasn't really sure what to do and I was getting nervous. I started just driving down random streets and then turning onto the next one and going down that. I was basically just going down every street, and the car followed me through about 4 streets, I would say. As I kept going, it randomly pulled out and sped past me. I heard the engine of the car make a loud roar as it did. After that, they drove away, and when I was sure I couldn't see them anymore, I turned around and went back towards my house. I got home, and then everything was fine. I've always wondered after that, though, why the person followed me and who it was. I also wonder how they knew which car was mine and why they parked next to my car.
I worked at Target up until as recently as 6 months ago. It was a job that I had for a total of 1 year and 5 months, working in multiple departments. I started out as a cashier, but then moved to mostly the customer service area. This is something that happened towards the end of my career there. I remember it like it was yesterday, as it was still pretty recent. It was a Friday afternoon, and I was working in the customer service desk. This store was a super Target, and we had 2 entrances. The service desk was near the entrance doors, and it was at the front facing the rest of the store. Things were somewhat busy, but manageable during the first few hours. Generally, working at the service desk was pretty easy for me, and I liked it a lot better than being a cashier. At one point, a few hours into my shift, a man came in the store, and I noticed him walking directly over to me. He had a big Target bag in his hands, and I was expecting him to be making a return. The man was average height, looked to have blonde hair but wore a hat, and wore shorts and a t-shirt. Things started out normal. He told me that he wanted to make a return, and then pulled a laptop out of his Target bag. He didn't have the box for the laptop or anything, but he did have a receipt. It was one of the laptops that we sold, and it went for about $400. The man told me that the laptop did not work as soon as he opened it, and that it must be defective or something. He said that he wanted a full refund and was upset that it didn't work, and he would buy another laptop elsewhere. He opened up the laptop and tried turning it on, showing me that it didn't work. I told the man that he could return it, but I would need to see a proof of purchase. He then took the receipt that he had and showed it to me. I asked to see it, and the man handed it over. Immediately, I could tell that the receipt was fake. Working in customer service, I saw countless receipts and dealt with many returns. Sometimes people would try and return stuff with no proof of purchase at all. Other times they would try to return things that we didn't even sell. It was crazy the things that some people would do, but it didn't happen very often at all. I asked the man if he had any other proof of purchase, and he started to become angry. He told me that he had a receipt and said that that should be enough. He then started to complain about the laptop being broken again. I told the man that I was having a little bit of trouble with the receipt because I could tell that it was not a real one. I pointed out some of the differences to him. Some points of information on the receipt were in the wrong areas. The man insisted that it was real though. I took my walkie and called for my boss. They would have a better understanding of how to handle this situation than I would. When I did that though, the man grabbed the laptop and quickly walked away and out of the store. When my boss got to where I was, I told him about the incident. However, the man was gone by then. We talked about it for a while, but after that, I just continued with my shift. I took a break soon, and then returned back to work. By the time it was the early evening, several hours had gone by. We were always pretty busy then, and things would eventually get quieter. It was when things started to quiet down, and it was getting dark outside, that I saw the same man come inside the store again. He walked in the doors that were near me, and made his way into the store without looking at me. But then, he walked closer. A couple of minutes later, I noticed him staring at me. He was sort of behind a display that we had, and there were quite a few things that would obstruct my vision from the rest of the store. I hadn't seen him for several minutes, but I found this kind of creepy that he was looking at me. I had to ignore it though. I didn't know what the man was doing here, and if he was going to just buy something, or if he had any bad intentions of some sort. Clearly, he had just tried to scam us earlier. I went on with my work. Things only got quieter for the rest of the night until I was off at 9 p.m. At that point, I walked back to the middle of the store where the break room and employee area was. I clocked out and then left through the employee-only exit door in the middle that led out into the parking lot. I started walking to my car that was at the back center of the lot. Now, I hadn't seen the man for several hours, ever since I had spotted him staring at me about 2 hours earlier. But when I had made it within maybe 30 feet of my car, I saw the man again. He came up from behind a couple of parked cars that were across from mine and behind me closer to the store. I had heard somebody suddenly walking out into the parking lot where I was. I looked behind, and there was the man. I didn't say anything, and neither did he. He just started approaching me and walking closer. I turned and ran for my car, and was barely able to make it inside before the guy got there. He actually tried opening my driver's door. Luckily, I had locked it just in time. I didn't bother staying there to see what the man would do next. I immediately backed out and left the Target. As soon as I was on the road, I called one of my friends, who was working at the Target still at the time, to let her know what had happened. I heard back from her later that the parking lot was investigated, but the man was gone. In the rest of my time working there, I never did see him again. I wonder, though, what his intentions were. He was likely upset that I had foiled his plan, but I was just doing my job.
I work at Target. I am a cart attendant, and my main job is pushing carts into the store from the parking lot. It's a good way to earn money to pay for college during the summer. One Saturday, I was working a closing shift, and by 10 p.m. it was pretty dead. I was walking out of the grocery side front doors to look for carts when I heard on my walkie someone say, "Cart attendant." As employees, we all carried walkie-talkies to communicate, and we would call for each other by positions if we needed things. "Go ahead for cart attendant," I said. "Can you turn to channel 3? They answered. I didn't recognize the voice on the other end of the walkie. It was a man's voice, and it sounded pretty average to me. I didn't think much of it because we would occasionally have managers from other Targets help out at our location if it was a busy day or if somebody called in. Plus, I spent most of my time in the parking lot, so I didn't pay attention to who was working on the inside much. I said I was going to 3 and turned the channels on my walkie. I told him I was on 3, and he asked me if I could go to the east side of the building and meet him there. I was a little confused at this request because I didn't see anyone come outside when I was pushing carts, and it seemed like kind of a strange thing to ask. But we did have a cart corral on the east side of the building, and I remembered to myself how I had forgotten to check it in a long time. I figured it was overflowing, or maybe a glass bottle broke or something. I said I was on my way and walked to the side of the building. When I got there, I didn't see anybody. I looked around. The cart corral had maybe 4 or 5 carts in it. Nothing seemed out of place, except for one car parked about 40 feet from the corral on the side of the building. It was a black SUV. There appeared to be nobody in it. I grabbed my walkie and told him I was there. He said he was closer to the back of the building and I needed to see something. I started to walk farther down to see if anybody was actually there. Just after I passed the front of the SUV, its lights turned on. It was so bright I was blinded. I heard the back doors of the SUV open. After a couple seconds, I saw 3 men walking towards me. I turned and ran as fast as I could to the front of the building. When I made it to the corner of Target, they stopped chasing me and I went inside the store. I immediately found a manager and asked them who that was talking to me on the walkie-talkie. She said she didn't know and figured it was people who bought the same walkie brand and decided to prank us. I didn't tell her about the people chasing me because I didn't want to make a big deal out of it, and I figured there was nothing that could be done. I still work there, and nothing like that has happened since.
Years ago, I worked at Target. I've had many jobs since then, but one of the creepiest things that's happened to me came in my time there. So, I was still fairly new to the job. I should also mention that I was really young when I worked at Target. I was 17 years old, and it was literally the second job that I ever had. I lived with my parents and was in high school at the time. So, I'd been working there for maybe 2 or 3 months. I was a cashier, and one night I worked until 9:45 p.m. After getting off, I left Target and was walking in the parking lot to my car. Like right as I was leaving, I noticed this one guy who looked a little older than I was. He was wearing a red shirt and khakis, and I realized that he was probably a new coworker. I had never seen him before, but Target is a large store and is always getting new workers. I remember that the guy said hi to me, and I said hi back to him. He then asked me if I was just getting off, and when I said yes, He told me that he was as well, and he gave me a high five. I asked if he was new, and he said yes, he had just recently started. He asked me how my shift had gone, and after I told him about it, I asked him what he did. I hadn't noticed him at the registers, so I figured that he wasn't a cashier. He told me that he did a little bit of everything, and then said that he had been all over the place that night. Looking back, that's kind of an odd answer, but I didn't really think much of it at the time. As we talked, we were both walking out in the parking lot towards our cars. Then I remember that he asked me where I lived. I told him the basic general area, referencing a business that was pretty close to my house and right outside of my neighborhood. I remember that he said, "Nice, me too." I had not recognized him as having gone to my school or anything, but I guess it was possible he went to another school. I didn't bother to ask him what school he went to though, because just about then I arrived at my car. So I told him to have a good night and I was leaving now. The guy was nice and he said good night and kept walking. After I got in my car, I saw him get into a car that was parked adjacent to mine. I briefly looked at my phone like I normally did before leaving. The other guy seemed to do the same thing. Then I left. I began driving home, and I noticed that the guy started driving behind me. However, I thought nothing of it at all. He said that he lived right by me, so obviously he would be driving the same way. It took about 10 minutes to get back, and when I approached my neighborhood, the guy was still following me. As I turned off for the road right before my neighborhood, I remember seeing the guy keep going straight. I figured that's where he lived in that area, and I kept going. Now, this road that I was on, like I said, is right before my street. It's a very long road that also has a very low speed limit. So I was slowly making my way down, and after a while, I noticed a car pull onto the road. We were the only two cars on the road at this time, and the headlights looked the same as my coworker. I thought that it couldn't be though. I kept going and then turned onto my street. I drove to my house, which was not that far down. I parked in the driveway and then got out. In that time, I didn't see anything. However, right after getting inside, I noticed headlights in the street. I looked out and saw the same car that my coworker was driving down the street very slowly. I literally ducked down from the window, even though the chance of him looking into the house were slim. I really thought it was suspicious now what he was doing. We had lived on this street my whole life, and I had never seen this guy before. I was confident that he didn't live here. That made me suspicious that he had been following me. I'm not sure if he noticed my car in the driveway or not, because our driveway sort of curves out, and where I parked, it was sort of obstructed by trees. The rest of the night, I didn't see the guy, and I worked at Target for about 3 months after that. That entire time that I worked there, I never saw the guy again. I realized months later how strange that whole ordeal was. I don't think the guy worked at Target at all. I think he was just pretending to, and then he claimed to live in my neighborhood so that he could follow me home. Sure, maybe it was all a coincidence, but I really feel like it wasn't. I'm just glad nothing bad ever happened. I worked at a Target department store briefly when I was aged 16 to 17. This was kind of a long time ago now, maybe like 2014 or 15. When I got the job, I was a cashier, and I worked there for about 6 months. It was a job that I liked, but wasn't the best job in the world or anything. I would mostly just be up at the check lanes bringing up customers. This occurrence happened probably about 3 months or so after I started working there. Back then, I had recently gotten my own car. It was actually my parents' car, but they let me use it because nobody else really did. I would drive it to and from work from my parents' house, which was almost 10 minutes away. This time, I was working from like 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. or something like that. I don't remember the exact hours, but that was probably pretty close. About an hour or so in, I got a phone call on my cell phone. I had my ringtone set to vibrate so that it wouldn't make noise at work, but I could feel it. I was unable to answer it or even look to see who it was because I was busy. There were several customers in line waiting for me to help them. My phone rang again before I had a chance to look. Finally, when there was a short break in people, maybe 10 minutes later, I looked. It was a number that I did not recognize and figured maybe it was a wrong number or something. I went back to work after that, but whoever it was called me yet again. It seemed pretty odd. As I was busy working, I don't even know how many more times the person called me. It was at least 3 or 4. When it was time for my break, I went in and looked to see who it was. By now it was probably about 7 p.m., and I saw that the same person kept calling me. As I was doing that, they called again. Now that I wasn't working, I answered it. I heard a man's voice speaking, and I did not recognize who it was. He asked if he was speaking to me, mentioning my name. I said yes and was surprised. I asked who this was that was calling. The man said that he was waiting for me. He said he knew I was working at Target and he would be waiting for me when I left by my car. He said he was in the parking lot. I was very worried when I heard this. I didn't know what to say and was speechless for a few moments. The guy then hung up on me. Suddenly, everything changed. It went from a normal shift to very weird and scary. For several minutes, I wasn't sure what to do. I didn't want to go out to my car, and the guy was there. Possibly it was just a joke, but I didn't want to take any chances. I knew that I was parked in the back of the parking lot where it was not well lit. I ended up calling my mom and telling her about the calls that I had received. She told me that she would pick me up, or my dad could. I did not feel safe walking out to my car. I also blocked the number that had been calling me. I went back to work after my break and kept a careful eye out. During the time that I was working, things were not as busy anymore. I was looking all around for anybody looking at me or seeming suspicious in any way. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, though. When it was 9 o'clock and I got off, my mom and dad called me and said that they were there to pick me up. I was really happy I wouldn't have to go back to my car by myself. I left the Target and went to my parents' car right out front. We drove through the parking lot and my dad wanted to go past my car. We did, and it was really dark so we couldn't see much, but there was a car parked just a few spaces from mine, and somebody was inside of it. I couldn't tell any details about them though. Could that have been the person who had been calling me? We drove away after that. I left my car at the Target for like an hour, and then my dad went and got it. He said that the guy was gone who had been there before. After that experience, the person never bothered me again. I still have lots of questions though. I used to work at a Target department store as a cashier. I worked there for almost 6 months, but ended up quitting. The scariest thing that happened was one random night when I was working a night shift. I don't remember what time I started or exactly when I got off either, but I was working as a cashier and helping countless customers. The store was decently busy, and there was a steady amount of people at my register. I remember towards the end of my shift, this guy with a beard came into my line. I don't recall what he bought, and we had a very normal interaction. I don't remember anything out of the ordinary, but I did remember him just because of his beard. It was very long and memorable. So anyways, he walked away and then I helped the next person in line behind him. Probably 10 minutes or so after this, it was time for my final break of the night. I turned off the light to my check lane, helped the final customer, and then left. I walked to the front of the store and went down a quiet hallway to where our break room was. The break room had several tables, chairs, a refrigerator, and a TV. I sat down at a table and was the only person inside the entire break room at that time. So I just went on my phone like usual and caught up Snapchatting with friends and whatnot. About 5 minutes later, I noticed somebody come into the break room out of the corner of my eye, but I didn't really see them. The person then walked over and sat down right next to me at the table. When I looked up, I saw that it was the same bearded man from just minutes before. I was so confused as to what he was doing here. He didn't work at Target, so why would he be in the break room? The man told me that I had to go with him. I was asking him, "What are you talking about?" He said that we should go right now and was pointing towards the exit. There was an employee's entrance down the hallway from the break room. I asked the guy who he was, and he said that he would tell me later. Then the man stood up and said once more to leave with him. Now, obviously, this seemed crazy to me, and I had no intentions of doing so. Then he started to grab my arm to get me to stand up as well. I stood up but resisted, and I tried to start to walk away from him. When this happened, I suddenly heard the door open from behind. I looked back and saw one of my coworkers, Brian, entering the break room. He looked very confused by what he was seeing. I remember that the man tried pulling my arm to get me to go with him again, but I was still resisting. That's when Brian asked what was going on. The man finally let go of my arm and then ran away towards the employee's exit. I went over to Brian and told him the story. I said that I was so happy he walked in when he did. Looking back, I don't know what would have happened if he didn't. Brian went to see if the guy had left, and he did. Another coworker came into the break room a short time later, and we all talked about what happened. After that, I went back to work and finished up my shift. For the next several days, everything was fine. I worked one other time without any kinds of problems, but I remember that my next shift after that, I was working at night again. Things had been going by like normal. I had a few customers in my checkout line at probably about 9 o'clock. I remember that I casually looked up and suddenly saw the same bearded man in line. He didn't have any items with him. I had a really bad feeling about this. When it was his turn, I told him that I was going to call the police if I ever saw him again. The man laughed a little and said that he would be waiting for me when I got off. Then he just walked away and left. I went straight for my manager after that and told her about what had happened. We decided to call the police. They came out and we spoke with them about the situation. Then they went into the parking lot and actually found the man standing in the parking lot near my vehicle. It gave me the creeps when I heard that. I'm really glad that we called the police. I ended up getting a restraining order against the guy and haven't seen him since. This happened years ago, back when I was 19. It was summer and I was back from college at my parents' house. We lived in this neighborhood that was not too far behind a shopping center. There they had a bunch of stores and restaurants. One of the stores on the edge of the shopping center was a Target, and we would shop there all the time. I remember that one evening I decided to walk to the Target by myself to get a few snacks. I could have driven my car, but I enjoyed walking, and so I figured why not? I left our house sometime that night, and I walked on the sidewalk through the neighborhood. It took maybe 15 minutes to get to the Target store. It was a quiet night, and I walked alone and didn't see anybody else. Soon I came out from behind the Target and went around to the parking lot and then went inside. The Target store was pretty quiet. I easily walked over to the snack aisles and then found what I was looking for. Then I walked up to the checkouts, got my stuff, and then left the store. I didn't notice anything strange or weird happening. However, when I left, I walked out the doors, through the parking lot, and then to the left to get to the sidewalk. As I did this, I remember noticing someone walking after me. I know that they left the store after me, but I thought nothing of it at that point. At the time, I just sensed that somebody was behind me and I kept walking. I assumed that they would just go to their car in the parking lot. But when I got to the sidewalk and was walking away and could still hear them walking behind me, it was really strange. Because this time of night was very quiet, and what would the odds be of two people walking from the Target at this hour? I glanced behind me to see a man walking a good distance back, but he was still walking in my direction on the sidewalk. I kept walking, hoping that it was in fact just a crazy coincidence. I soon made it out of the shopping area entirely, and was now on one of the sidewalks entering my neighborhood. It was darker and much quieter over here. I still heard the guy walking a long ways back. At this point, I still wasn't too nervous, but I kept going and soon turned, and when the man turned as well, I got a bad feeling. I glanced back another time. He was still there, maybe slightly closer than before. Another thing that was interesting to me is that the man did not have a Target bag with him or was holding anything, so it appeared as though he didn't even buy anything at the Target. I was getting closer to my house now, but still a couple of minutes away. I tried to walk faster and hopefully stay a long ways ahead of the guy. He stayed about the same distance it seemed, but maybe got slightly closer. It was just him and I out there on the sidewalks. As I saw my street approaching, I would have to turn right, and our house was about halfway down it. I walked at the same rate for the next couple of minutes until I finally reached our street. Then I quickly turned right and started speed walking down the street. There would be probably 30 to 45 seconds before the man reached the street if he continued at his pace. After speed walking for like 10 seconds, I just started sprinting. I ran down our street until I got to our front yard. Then I quickly went inside. I was able to get in the house and was finally safe. I remember that I looked out the window and saw the man walk by down the street. Then I saw him walking back in the other direction like a minute or two later. But it doesn't quite end there. Maybe 10 minutes after that, I heard a car driving slowly down our street. I went to the window and looked out and saw that it was a car going super slow, maybe like 5 miles per hour. It passed by our house and went to the end of the street and then came back. I couldn't really see the driver, but I'm pretty sure it was the same guy. He must have gone back to the Target parking lot, got in his car, and then drove back looking for me or something. To me, this proved that he was a creep that was following me and not somebody who just lived in the neighborhood. After that, I never saw him again. I went to Target on a quiet night just last week. I didn't need much and was just there to look at some skincare products and get some that I needed. When I got inside the store, there wasn't many other people in there at all. This Target had just one set of doors that were the far left side. Once I went in, I walked all the way to the far right side of the store where they had the products that I wanted to look at. I made it there and began to look at them. Nobody else was in the aisle when I got there. I would say probably 5 minutes or so after being there, I felt someone enter the aisle that I was in. I didn't see them, but I sensed that somebody else was there. I didn't bother to look over. They seemed to stay at the far end of the aisle, though, without moving, for kind of a long time. I looked over casually. There was a man standing there at the end of the aisle, just staring at me. He wasn't like smiling or looking mad or anything. He was just staring at me. We made eye contact for a moment, but I had to look away. This was sort of uncomfortable, and I chose to leave the aisle. I moved to the next one over to get one of the products that I had planned to. After I picked them up, I saw the man enter this aisle. I was a little bit creeped out, and he took a couple of steps closer to me. That's when I looked at him and I asked if I could help him. He said yes, but didn't expand on that any further. I decided to just walk away. I left that aisle and moved out into one of the main ones. Then I began walking to the far back of the store, past the grocery aisles. I heard the man walking after me, and I looked over my shoulder to see him about 20 feet back. This was really weird. I wanted this creep to just leave me alone. After I got to one of the back aisles of the store, I approached the electronics department. That's when I saw one of the employees, and I walked over to them. When I did, the man who had been following me walked into a random aisle. I let the Target employee know that a man had been acting strange and seemingly followed me throughout the store. The employee told me that he would keep an eye out for the man, and if there were any further problems, he would get security. This eased my mind just a little bit. I decided to wrap around the store and go back to where I was originally looking at the products. I had the two that I was buying for sure with me in my hands, but I wanted to look at a couple of other ones still. Eventually, I made it back there, and I didn't encounter the man the entire time that I looked. I was there for maybe 5 more minutes and decided to get one more thing and then to check out and leave. They only had a few check lanes that were at the far end of the store by the exit. I walked over but got about halfway there before noticing the man again. He was standing around by the checkouts, just kind of walking around. He didn't notice me, and I quickly went into an aisle so he wouldn't. I decided to wait there for a few moments and waiting to see if the guy would leave. When I looked back out, he was still there. It was like he was just waiting for me, kind of pacing around by the check lanes. I started to fear the worst, like he would follow me out of the store to my car. In the dark and quiet parking lot, things were much more dangerous than inside the store. I didn't want to go to the checkout or he would see me for sure. I thought about what I could do. There was the option to let the employee know, but I felt like if he just asked the man to leave, the guy would be waiting outside for me in the parking lot, which would be just as bad. I also knew that the Target security guards couldn't really do a whole lot. I decided not to do that and that I would just leave. The things that I was buying could wait, and I didn't need them on this night. I put them back on the shelf. Then, I walked carefully over to the starting area of the checkouts. The man was much further down, because the first several lanes were closed. I very carefully went from behind one aisle to behind one of the closed check lanes, making sure that the man didn't see me. I ducked down behind one and went to the end of that check lane. I very carefully and slowly walked down to the exit. Then when I was close to the doors, I got up and I left the store without the man noticing. Anybody else who saw me, I'm sure, thought I was acting weird, but I didn't care. I just wanted to get away. Just to be sure, though, I went as fast as I could through the parking lot to my car, and then I drove home. Luckily, I didn't see the man again. After that experience, I haven't been back to that Target. When I go back, I'm hoping nothing else strange happens. I used to work at Target a couple of years ago. I worked inside the store on the sales floor and mostly on the grocery side. During this time, I was a part-time employee and I worked maybe 20 to 30 hours a week. One night, I was working a pretty standard shift for me. It was from 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. When it started, things were kind of busy. I would move all around one side of the store and do whatever I needed to, mainly stock shelves or organize things. I also answered customer questions and told them where certain items were if they wanted to know. I'd been working there for about 6 months at the time, and I knew the store like the back of my hand. So fast forward to about 9:30 p.m. or so that night. By then, the store had become very quiet. We were open until 11 p.m. back then, so we were not about to close, but it was still very quiet. Many of my coworkers had left, and the overnight team was beginning to arrive. On the grocery side, though, it was easy to stay busy. That side always had more shoppers, so it required more attention. All of the employees at Target carry a walkie-talkie for communication. I heard somebody say my name on the walkie, and I responded to them. I wasn't sure who it was, but they told me to go to the next channel, so I did. I was used to people calling me on there, and had received several calls earlier in the night. When you got a call on the walkie, usually it was anything from taking your break to being needed in another section of the store. As I was flipping to the next channel, I was wondering who it was that was calling me. After changing channels, I announced that I was there. At first, I heard nothing at all. Then, after a few seconds, I heard this creepy-sounding laugh. It went on, and I spoke again, asking who it was that was talking to me. They didn't answer, though, and just kept laughing. Once more, I asked who it was, but was starting to suspect that it was a joke. Then they stopped laughing and said my name. It was a man speaking in a very deep voice, like he was trying to disguise it. He said that he was waiting for me in the parking lot. I laughed a little, assuming that it was somebody just messing around. After all, most of us were just about done for the night. I still couldn't figure out who it was, though. I kept working, and pretty soon was done and could clock out. I went into the employee-only area, got my things, and then left the store. Now, the parking lot was very quiet. Most of the cars belonged to employees and were parked towards the middle. Then there was my car, parked near the way back corner. It had been very busy when I arrived. So when I was walking out to my car and about halfway there, I noticed one other car parked near mine. It was a few rows over and to the left, at least 100 feet away, but the engine was running. When I reached my vehicle and was just a few feet from it, I noticed the car starting to drive. I really wasn't thinking anything of it until it began heading in my direction. And not only that, but it started going really fast. I didn't recognize the car as belonging to anybody that I knew. It quickly drove closer, and I got inside of my car and locked the door. Then the car parked in the space next to mine, but going in the opposite direction. I looked over, but the window was really tinted and I couldn't really see in. It was at that moment that I remembered what the person had said to me on the walkie. Was that not a joke? I sort of had a bad feeling about this. Still, I figured that I would just drive home, and I hoped that whoever this was would not follow me. As soon as I started to pull away, though, the car started driving and turned around. I then realized that's exactly what was going on. I turned and started heading back towards Target. I didn't want to drive home being followed. I drove back towards the front middle of the parking lot and closer to the store. This was where most of the other cars were parked and scattered around. I parked in between two other cars that were parked already. The car that was following me drove closer, but then parked across and a little ways back. Now it was maybe 50 feet away from me. Then I got out of my car and walked extremely fast for the entrance of Target. I looked back briefly and saw that the car was still running, but nobody got out. That made me feel a little bit better. After I made it inside Target, I saw one of my coworkers who I knew walking by, and I told him about what happened. We both decided to look and see if the car was still there. After making it to the entrance doors, we looked out and I pointed to the car. We watched it, and then something surprising happened. It pulled out of the parking space that it had backed into. Then it slowly drove up the aisle and out of sight. The car had finally left. I then left Target once more and headed for my vehicle. I walked quickly and made it inside. Then I started the engine and backed out. But after I backed out, I was going to drive down the normal way that I usually left. But it was then that I saw a car in the far distance coming from the corner of the parking lot opposite to me. It was headed in my direction, and I was pretty sure that it was the same car. I scrambled to turn my car to face the other direction. The car was still really far away from me, but it was getting closer. Then I quickly drove out of the lesser-used back exit of Target. This road led to another quieter road that went behind another store that was nearby. I think that it was a sporting goods store, and after I went on the road, I went into the parking lot. From there, I drove all the way around the sporting goods store and parked on the side of it. I knew that the car following me would have no way of knowing that I was there. It probably assumed that I just tried to get back on the highway. I waited there, just hoping that I would not see headlights coming around the corner. Several minutes went by, and thankfully, I didn't. Then, I was finally able to leave and go home. After that experience, nothing like that happened while working at Target. I don't know who it was that was talking to me that night on the walkie. It was very possible to get on our frequency, even if you were in the parking lot. I just don't know who would do it, or why. I'm a young woman and I shop at Target all the time. I've been going there regularly for years, and luckily, I live near several of them in my city. There used to be one particular Target location that I would go to a lot, but ever since last year, I haven't been back to that one. It was sort of on my way home from my old work, so many nights after my old job, I would stop at that Target after. One night, I had stopped and was doing some shopping. The store was not too busy, but it wasn't dead either. I would say there was an average amount of people there. I was kind of near the back of the store when suddenly my phone started to ring. I didn't recognize the number, but I'm one of those people who will answer a call from a number I don't recognize. I picked it up and said hello. I could hear that the person on the other end was a male, but he seemed to be talking in sort of a weird voice. He said hi to me, and I asked who this was. All he said was, "I can see you." I asked once again who this was and tried thinking of all my friends who might be playing a joke on me. All he said once again was that he could see me. I laughed a little, knowing that this had to be a joke. But then, the man started talking again. He said I was at Target and that I was shopping near the electronics, which I was. He then asked me what I was getting. He even described to me what I was wearing at the moment. Now I was sort of creeped out. I didn't know of anybody who knew I was at this Target. Plus, I didn't recognize the guy's voice at all. I asked where he was, and the man on the other end just started to laugh. He then hung up on me. I was now suddenly paranoid. I looked all around me in every direction, but I didn't see anyone. I felt at that point that I should leave because I was suddenly very uncomfortable. I went to the front of the store and walked to the check lanes. I had a few things in my basket and went to the self-checkout. I checked out as quick as I could and then left the store. After that, I haven't been back to that particular Target since. I talked with many of my friends about it, and we think it was probably an employee who had seen me shopping there before. We figure he was either trying to play a joke on me or was actually a real creep. Even if it was a joke, though, it's a pretty creepy joke to play. Either way, I don't know how they got my number, and I hope they never call me again. I used to shop at Target all the time, but recently I don't want to go back there, at least not to the location that I live by. Some creepy and weird things happened to me there. There's really only one Target that's close to where I live. It's been my main store for years to get just about anything. There's some other stores that I go to as well, but Target has the best variety. I've always preferred it over Walmart as well. One night, I went shopping after work. I was getting a lot of items, mainly groceries. I got a cart and began shopping around the store. It wasn't all that busy, and that made things go smoothly. After shopping for probably about 30 minutes, I was almost done. My cart had lots of items in it, and I was in the last area of the store that I would be going to, which was the cold section. The refrigerated items and the freezer items is what I would always get last. That way, they wouldn't melt by the time I got home. When I got to that section of the store, it was empty. I was the only person there. They had a freezer at the back of the store, and I was getting something from it when I saw something strange. It was like movement of some sort behind the items. This particular freezer section was up against the very back of the store leading to the back room. That's when I realized that a person was back there, behind the freezer shelves. I could see between the levels of shelves that they had, but not by much. Somebody was right behind the spot that I was at. At first, I thought it was kind of funny, but I soon realized it wasn't a Target employee. I moved down to get something else, and whoever was there seemed to move down with me. As I was examining a product, I could see that the person was wearing black, not the typical red shirt and khakis that a Target employee would wear. Then, they got closer, and I noticed that I could now see their head through the gap between the shelves. The person was wearing a black ski mask. My only thought was that this was really strange. I moved even further down, and the masked man moved down with me. He was beginning to really freak me out. He kept staring at me from the other side. Luckily for me, I only needed one more item from that aisle. I went to grab it, as the masked man stared at me. Then, as I was reaching for the product, the guy reached over and shoved the whole box of them at me. Multiple items fell onto the floor. I put them back as he disappeared into the freezer. This guy was causing problems, and I decided to tell an employee about him. I walked down a few aisles before finding somebody who worked there. I told them about the guy and how he was inside of the freezer. The employee told me that she would tell the person to leave and that they couldn't be back there. There happened to be doors leading to the back room of the store right nearby, and I watched her walk through them. About a minute later, the employee emerged again. She told me that she couldn't find anybody back there at all. Whoever had been doing that must have left. I hadn't seen anybody else come out of the doors, though. I shrugged it off and was done with my shopping, so I decided to head out. I walked up to the front and paid for everything, then left the store. About a week later, I returned. I would say that I went grocery shopping roughly once a week. I didn't have a specific day or anything like that I would go, but on average it was probably about once. This time that I went back to the Target was just like any other. I did all of my shopping in about 30 minutes or so, and then checked out with all of my items. After I left the store, I walked out to my car and unloaded the groceries into it. Then I started driving home. This particular Target has several other businesses around it, like just past the parking lot. There was also a few trees and bushes around for scenery. As I was driving away, leaving the parking lot, I was driving between some other businesses and the Target parking lot going to a connecting road. That's when I saw the same guy dressed in all black and a ski mask. He was halfway hiding behind a bush, and he popped out and looked directly at me as I drove away. I drove right past him in disbelief. This was the same guy who I had seen last time I had been at this same Target. But this time he was outside, not inside the store. It was crazy to me how I specifically saw him. Maybe he just liked to go to Target and mess with people. I really didn't know. But what I did know is that I was really weirded out by this. The way he was hiding in the bushes was concerning. Luckily, I was away from him now and on the way home. After that experience, I didn't go to Target for almost 2 weeks. When I returned, it was just another routine shopping trip, just like any other. I did my shopping like always and then left the store. It was nighttime again, and things were pretty quiet inside and outside of the Target. I had parked sort of in the middle of the parking lot, about halfway back. There were a few other cars around mine. When I got back to my car, I unloaded the groceries again and got inside. I started my engine and was just about ready to drive away. I happened to glance over at the car that was parked directly next to me to the left for no particular reason. When I glanced over, though, I noticed movement. It caught my attention, and my eyes stayed focused on it. The entire car had looked empty to me. The car was a standard-looking white sedan, and the back windows were tinted dark, but the front windows I could see through. That's when somebody emerged from the back seat, crawling over into the front passenger seat. It was a guy wearing all black and a ski mask. My jaw dropped when I saw this. He looked right at me through the windows separating us. He continued to stare at me for probably 5 seconds or so as I sat there in total shock. Then, his door started to open. I was so surprised, still from just seeing the guy, that I didn't do anything. It was like I couldn't move. After he opened the door, he stood up and reached for my driver's door. I finally came to my senses and hit the lock switch. Just moments later, the man with the mask tried opening my driver's door, which had just locked. He then leaned in very closely to my driver's window, basically pressing his face against it. I was beyond creeped out. He stared right at me, as close as he possibly could. I yelled at him to go away, but he didn't move. I put my car into reverse and then started backing out. The guy grabbed onto my car as I backed away. He was trying to stay with me, and when I had backed out and began driving, he finally let go. I saw him then run back to the car that he had been inside. I hit the gas harder to leave as soon as possible. Then I was able to make it out of the parking lot, and I quickly turned off to a busier street. After that, I quickly turned into another parking lot and then turned my lights off and parked. I watched, and several seconds later, I saw a car come out of the Target parking lot and drive quickly down the street past me. I was pretty sure that that was the guy. After the car was long gone, I was able to drive home, and I made it back okay. This wasn't all that long ago. Each of the last 3 times I went to that Target, I've seen the same man. Why is he there, and what is he doing? I really don't know. I haven't been back to that Target since. This is something that took place many years ago when I was a child. I believe I was about 7 years old. One day, I went shopping with my mother and younger sister at Target. It was a common place for my entire family to go and get whatever. When we got there, my sister was sitting in the shopping cart and my mother was pushing it. Then I was walking alongside her. We walked around the store getting things for a while. I remember that we got to like the back end of the store, sort of near the corner. I don't remember what department it was, but it was not the groceries, I know that. So as my mother was shopping around, somehow I wound up in like the next aisle over from her. I'm not sure if I was distracted by something on the shelf or what, but I was still really close by. That's when I saw a Target employee approaching from I'm not even sure where. It was a man wearing the classic red shirt and khakis. He approached me, and I just remember he asked if I wanted to see something really cool. Of course I did, and I said yes. Then he told me to follow him and started walking away. But he didn't go very far before there were these doors that led to the back room. I had always seen these doors in stores, and I knew that I wasn't allowed to go past them. I had also always wondered what was behind those doors and what was in the back room of the store. So he opened them and told me that I could go in. I was really curious, and I also thought that it was so cool that he was showing me this. I walked in after him, and then he closed the doors behind us. It was almost like he was giving me a tour, and he was pointing at stuff and telling me what it was for. I remember that he said that's where they kept all the items before they went out into the store. We continued to walk farther into the back a little bit. By now, I had sort of forgot about going back to my mother and sister. I was just really interested in what I was seeing. I felt like it was okay that I was back here, because this guy worked at Target. Then I remembered that this other guy, who also appeared to be an employee, walked over to us. He said hi, and then the three of us kept walking. Then I remember seeing this other door that led to outside. The men told me that I should see where the deliveries were made, and said that I could go outside. This is when I first had a bad feeling. For some reason, I hadn't found it to be a problem to walk in the back with the men. But now that I was being asked to actually go outside, it felt completely different. I knew that my mother would be upset if I left the building. I stopped, even though they were encouraging me to leave. I said no thanks, and then started to walk back. My mother was probably looking for me, and I said that I had to go back to her. I remember the two guys were saying it was fine and she was okay with it, but I knew that they hadn't spoken to her, so I got more suspicious then. I started to kind of walk back towards the back doors that we had come in through. That's when one of the men started walking towards me aggressively. That was enough to make me start running away. I sprinted as fast as I could towards the back doors. I heard the guy running right after me. I remember that I just barely reached the doors and opened them. The man reached me right as I did, but my mom was right on the other side of the doors and saw me come out of there. The man noticed this and then turned and ran away. My mom asked me why I had been in the back room. When I told her the story, she went back there herself with me to see if the men had gone, but they weren't back there anymore. The back door that had been open leading to outside was also now closed. I remember my mother found one of the store managers, and it led to a big thing. I don't really remember much else after that. Looking back though, I'm just really glad that I realized when I did to go back to my mother. I don't think either of those men really worked at Target at all. Last week, I went to Target after the gym just to get some milk. It was a weekday morning and probably like 11 a.m. I went to the Target not that far away from my apartment and went inside. I walked straight for the grocery department, which was at the far other end of the store. Things didn't seem all that busy at first. When I got to the groceries, I found the milk, took one, and then walked up to the checkout. When I got near the check lanes, I saw that there was a very long line. I was kind of surprised because the store wasn't even that busy, but there was nothing that I could do. I waited in line and things moved slowly. After probably 5 minutes or so of waiting, finally it was my turn at one of the self-check lanes. It didn't take me long at all to pay for the milk, and then I was on my way and left the store. I walked to my car that was at the back of the parking lot and got inside. It was then that I saw I had a new text message on my phone from a number not familiar to me. I opened it up and saw a picture of myself waiting in line inside Target, taken just minutes earlier. It was taken from near the exit doors and kind of zoomed in. I thought it must be from one of my friends and they were playing a joke on me or something. I had gotten a new phone not that long before this, so it must have been why I didn't recognize the number. I was thinking of which friend it would be that would go there. When I was inside, I definitely hadn't seen anybody that I knew or recognized. I texted back, asking who it was. Whoever had sent me the text responded pretty quickly. So fast that I saw it before I even put my phone down. It said in all caps, "Your stalker." Obviously, this still seemed like a joke to me. I replied something like, LOL, and then I set my phone down to drive home. I went back to my apartment, which is a 4-story building with a large parking lot. When I arrived back, I saw that I had a new text, and I looked at it before getting out of my car. The text said, "No, really." I responded again by asking who this was that was texting me. They responded very quickly once more, but it was a picture. I looked at it and saw that it was of the back of my car. I looked behind me in the parking lot and saw a car parked directly behind me in the other row. I could see somebody in the driver's seat but couldn't make out any details. Whoever it was appeared to be wearing a hat and sunglasses. I didn't recognize them or the car as anybody that I knew though. By now, I was really creeped out, and I was afraid to go inside my apartment. Maybe whoever it was would try to follow me inside. I blocked the number, and then backed out of my parking space and started driving away. I hadn't noticed the car following me to my apartment at all, but I now noticed it following me out of the parking lot. When I left my apartment complex, I merged onto a busier road. There were lots of cars going both ways. The car behind me followed as I drove a little ways down. I came up to a flashing yellow arrow to turn left, and I got in the left turn lane. Traffic was thick, and cars were coming non-stop, so I was unable to turn immediately. Then, finally, when the light turned to a solid yellow, I had an opportunity to go. But I waited until the very last moment, when the cars were starting to come from the opposite direction. By the time I went, the car behind me couldn't go and was stuck at the light. I was able to get away for a few minutes, and I drove right back to my apartment complex. This time, when I got there, I parked on the other side of the parking lot. Then, I quickly went inside. I didn't even bother to look out the window to the parking lot to see if the person came back. But after that, I didn't receive any more strange texts. I haven't seen them since either.
For some background of this story, I'm a female, and I worked at Target for a while, over a year ago. The Target that I worked at was very close to my apartment at the time, and it was a pretty enjoyable job for me. My favorite part was talking with coworkers and becoming friends with them. Mostly what I would do is work in the clothing department. I would do all sorts of things there, and it wasn't very stressful because things usually don't get busy like they do in the grocery section. At the time of this story, I had been working there for almost 4 months. I remember it very well. It all started on a typical day at work. I was in the clothing department, particularly the women's section, straightening up items that were out of place. It was during the daytime, and the store was calm. This is when a tall man approached me. Assuming he was a customer who had a question about something, I greeted him, asking how I could help. The man stood there, looking directly at me with a somewhat creepy grin on his face for a moment. He then said, "Yes, you can help me, by going out with me tonight." I laughed it off. I had no interest in going out with the man, but I wasn't scared of him or anything. I just told him that I had a boyfriend, even though I didn't actually have one. This was always the best way to tell off a guy that I wasn't interested in my experience. The man replied rather quickly, saying, "No, you don't." I told him that I did, and I asked the man if he needed help finding anything. He then responded with an even creepier reply. "Yes, directions to your house." I laughed off this remark as well. I was just hoping that the man was joking around, because this was getting really weird. After he said that, I told him that I had a lot of work to do,
and I told him to have a good day. Then I started making my way to another section of the large clothing department that we had. The clothing area was practically big enough to get lost in. I was hoping to lose sight of the man, but when I started moving away, he followed. When I had made it to another section and he was still next to me, I stopped. I didn't have a problem with confrontation, and I said to the man, "Why are you following me? You're kind of creeping me out." The guy put his hands up as if to say, "My bad." He then walked away, and it was a huge relief. I had dealt with customers asking me out or trying to flirt with me a couple of times. It didn't happen very often, but here and there it did. None of them had been nearly as bad as this, though. I kept working for several hours. By then, I had forgotten about my experience earlier, but I soon remembered when I spotted the same man. I couldn't believe it at first. This was now about 3 hours after our first interaction. To me, it was still mind-blowing that he was still in the store. Maybe he had left and then come back. Either way, it was strange, and it was now a bigger concern for me, because shortly after I had spotted him, I saw him look over at me and then look quickly away. The man was sort of far away too. It looked like he was almost hiding from me. He stood, mostly covered by a rack of clothing, staring in my direction. I moved slightly and kept working, to which the man moved slightly as well to keep looking at me. I stopped and sighed. This was really annoying now. I walked away, leaving what I was doing. I moved to a whole nother section of the store, far away from that one. There, I didn't really have any work to do, but I just wanted to get that man off of me. I was now in the grocery area, and I was there for about a minute before spotting the man again. He was walking into the area, and he saw me for a split second, and then disappeared into a nearby aisle. At this point, I decided to take my break. I had one that I could take at any time, and I was planning to after I had finished the work that I was doing in the clothing department. But seeing as this creep was back and still following me around, I decided to just take my break now. I radioed in on my walkie-talkie to let my supervisor know I would be taking my break. Then I headed towards the front end of the store. Our break room was through doors at the front, and I walked in there. When I got inside the break room, I thought back to the crazy situation. Did that man seriously think he was being slick? I mean, I spotted him twice, and it was like he thought I couldn't see him. I just hoped that he would notice I was not there anymore and then leave. I'm not going to lie, I took a little bit extra time on my break. I was pretty concerned to return back out and see the man again. If I did see him, I was going to have to tell a coworker or our security team. I didn't want to have to do that, but I would if it was necessary. When I went back out though, I didn't notice the man anywhere. I went back to work in the clothing department, but was much more alert and constantly looking around. I didn't see the guy for the rest of my shift that night, which was about 2 more hours. I was really happy about this. But still, I thought possibly he was still there looking at me somewhere and had just gotten better about hiding. At the end of the day though, I don't think he was. I left work and went home, not seeing the guy at all. Soon, I forgot all about him. I worked several more times that week, mostly my usual shifts. One night, the very next week, I found myself working on a quiet evening. I was almost done, and it was past the busy amount of customers that we would usually get between 4 p.m. and 7 p.m. I was doing my usual work of organizing a section of the clothing department. That's when I got a call on my walkie. Somebody radioed asking for me, and I radioed back telling them to go ahead. I wasn't quite sure who had said it, but that wasn't uncommon. A big store like Target has so many employees, plus there are always new people. A handful of my coworkers, I could instantly recognize their voices over the walkie-talkie, but many of them I could not. After telling them to go ahead, they asked me to go to Channel 3. This is how we would communicate without other employees hearing us. It was used for more descriptive details or directions on what we were supposed to do. After turning to 3, I told them to go ahead again. That's when I was told that I was needed in receiving and to help with something quick. I told them that I was on my way and began walking over. Receiving was the back room of the store basically. I wouldn't work back there a lot, but I had helped with things there several times in the past. It took me a few minutes to walk all the way back there, and when I had made it, I exited the store into the back. Things were very quiet back there. I had expected to see someone there waiting for me. I turned my walkie to Channel 3 again and said that I was in receiving. Nobody said anything, but I heard my voice echo onto somebody else's walkie nearby. I then called out, asking where they were, but I didn't get a response. I walked closer to the voice, which was near one of the doors leading to outside. I noticed that it was open, and I could see outside into the night. That's when I saw the man again. He stepped out from behind a shelf back there. I couldn't believe he was here. "That was you on the walkie, wasn't it?" I said to him. The man just started walking towards me. I backed away as he got closer. I looked at how much taller he was than me. If he tried to grab me, it would be difficult to get away. He got closer and I turned around, but as soon as I did, he grabbed my arm. Then he started to pull me backwards. I started yelling, but back there, it wasn't likely anybody would hear me. Suddenly, I heard the doors leading back to the shopping area open. I then saw one of my coworkers, Amy, walking over. I yelled at her and she asked what was going on. The man let me go and then sprinted out the doors outside. I ran over to Amy and explained to her what had happened. Amy told me that she had heard the person asking me to go to Channel 3. She said that when she didn't recognize the voice and was just being nosy in general, she turned to Channel 3 as well. She was wondering what I was being asked to do. When she heard I was supposed to go to receiving, she found it strange, because she had just been there earlier in the night and wasn't aware of anything that would be done back there. She decided to see for herself, and I'm really glad that she did. We had to call the police and report the incident, but unfortunately, not much could be done. The man had bought a walkie-talkie and got on the same frequency as us, which was not hard to do at all. Many standard walkie-talkies were capable of it. I'm just glad I was all right. I worked at Target for a few months after that, and luckily, never saw the man again. My girlfriend works at Target, and sometimes I pick her up from work. Normally she drives herself, but I remember that a few months ago her car was in the shop for several days. So I agreed to pick her up from work at Target. She was supposed to get off of work at 10 p.m., which is the time that they close. I arrived a little bit early at probably about 9:50 or so. I texted my girlfriend letting her know that I was there, and she texted me saying that she just had to finish a few things and would be out. So I parked towards the back of the parking lot and in a random space. The store was closing soon, so the parking lot was almost empty. There were cars scattered all over, which I assumed to mostly be just employees. After parking, I took out my phone and started watching random YouTube videos while I waited. I remember that at one point, I noticed something out of the corner of my eye and I looked up. There was a woman walking through the parking lot a long ways away. I couldn't tell where she had come from, because it didn't look like she had just left the Target store. The woman appeared to just kind of be walking around. She was also going pretty slowly, and she was wearing short sleeves and no jacket, even though it was almost freezing outside. It seemed odd to me, so I watched her for a little longer. She walked a little ways, and it didn't really seem like she was going anywhere in particular, just kind of almost pacing around. I found it a little bit odd, but I paid my attention back to my phone after a short time. Sometime later though, when it was nearly 10 o'clock, I looked over to the store to see if my girlfriend was leaving. She was not, and then I looked around and noticed that the woman was now in another place. She was still walking around, and I looked back to my phone again. Soon it was 10 p.m. My girlfriend still had not left, but I expected her to at any moment. I looked around again. This time though, I noticed the one lady who had been walking around the parking lot was behind me and pretty close to my car. My heart sank as I saw her walking in my direction. My car had been running the whole time because it was cold and I had the heat on. The woman then approached my passenger side door. She came up to the window and looked in and then started to knock on it. I was about to roll down the window just a crack to see what it was that she wanted, but the lady's knock on the window quickly turned into a bang. She was knocking harder and harder. I did not roll the window down. Soon the lady was pretty much pounding on the window as hard as she could. At that point, I put my car into reverse and backed up. She started to chase after me as I did so. I kept going and moved to the left. Then I put my car into drive and quickly went away. The woman briefly chased after me but was not able to keep up. I went to the front Target doors hoping that my girlfriend would just happen to be leaving, but she was not there. So I drove around the parking lot and then parked at the complete far opposite end to where I had been before. I did not see the crazy lady anywhere. After I parked there, I texted my girlfriend, telling her about the woman who tried to break my window. My girlfriend still hadn't left, and I figured that she was finishing whatever it was she had to do before she would leave. I kept sitting there, but then, seemingly out of nowhere, the crazy woman appeared again. She came charging at me. I was quick to put my car into reverse and back away from the spot. This time, I was able to get away from her before she reached me. I drove around the parking lot to the other side again, and this time I noticed my girlfriend leaving. She was finally out of Target, and I quickly drove over and let her in the car. Then we left the parking lot and got out of there. My girlfriend seemed to think the story of the lady was quite funny. To me, though, it was actually very creepy. I'm not sure if the lady was on drugs or what. That would be my best guess, but why she kept coming after me, I have no idea. For some background to this story, I'm a female. This happened when I went to Target last year to do some shopping. I was going to be getting quite a few things. I went to Target maybe once a week on average and got groceries and other stuff. Sometimes I would spend a long time there, and it's been one of my favorite stores for a long time. I went there one night after work, and it was maybe 7 p.m. or so. I was shopping around, getting a lot of the normal things that I usually did. At one point, I was sort of in the middle of the store. It was at the start of the clothing section, but also near some aisles with other things like games and sporting goods. It was at that moment when this man approached me. He said hi, and then said that he had to show me something funny. He said to follow him quick. I didn't know what he was talking about, but I did follow him. I left my cart and we only went like one aisle just around the corner. He showed me some Lego product on the shelf and made a joke about it, but I didn't really understand it. I don't even remember exactly what he said, but overall I was just kind of confused. I just know that I laughed to be nice, and it was kind of awkward. Then the guy said that's all and he told me to have a good night. So I walked back over to my cart and then continued with what I was doing. I didn't really think much of the interaction after that. I would say I spent maybe 10 more minutes inside the Target shopping. Then I checked out and left. I got back to my house and then unpacked everything that I got. At this time, I lived in a smaller house by myself. So that very same night, after I went to bed, I woke up sometime. I'm a really light sleeper, so I didn't really know what woke me at first, but I just knew that it was a little bit after midnight. I was going to just go right back to bed, but then I heard a noise coming from the other room. That made me completely awake and more alert. I listened to the noise and couldn't tell what exactly it was at first. I was so curious, so I got up and left my bedroom. Then I moved towards the back of the house where the living room was. That's where the noise was coming from, and right when I entered the room, I saw someone at the window. I couldn't tell any details about them, but could just see that someone was right outside the window. I stopped where I was, just about a step into the room, and I didn't go any farther in. Then I saw that there appeared to be another guy at my back door. 2 people were outside of my house. To me, it seemed like the noise was actually coming from the back door area. It wasn't very loud, and I didn't really know what exactly they were doing. I ran out of the room and into a small closet in my hallway. I decided to hide in there, and then I called the police on my cell phone. I said that I thought 2 people were possibly trying to break in. Now, I didn't turn on any lights or anything when I got up, so I don't think the men knew that I was awake. As I was hiding in the closet, I realized that. I considered leaving the closet to turn on a light and see if that would cause the men to leave my property, but I couldn't gather up the courage to do so. I was hidden in the closet and did not want to get out. Inside of it, though, I could barely hear the noises. If I was completely still, I could just sort of hear them. They seemed to come and go. And that went on for the next several minutes, but the police ended up getting there much faster than I thought they would. Probably 5 minutes after I made the 911 call, I heard more louder noises. At first, I was scared by it, until I realized that the people talking were police. I left the closet at that point and realized that nobody had broken in. After that, I went to the window and saw the police with 2 men. It was at that point that I recognized one of the guys. He was the man that talked to me earlier that same night when I was at Target. I was really confused as to what was going on. The police told me that the men appeared to be attempting to break into my house. I told them how I had seen one of the guys at Target and stuff. There was a whole investigation done, and I found out some shocking details. An AirTag was found inside of my purse. It had been in my shopping cart when I was at Target. The first guy must have distracted me, while the other guy put the AirTag inside of my purse. Why they chose me, I don't know, but I'm really glad that I woke up so easily and called the police before the men were able to get inside of my house. I had a really strange and creepy experience when I went to Target several weeks ago. I went shopping for a few items, and I go to Target all the time. After I got there, I was towards one of the far back corners of the store. It was very quiet over there, as the time was about 8:30 p.m., and there were not very many shoppers anymore. Out of nowhere, I saw a guy come around a corner from the next aisle. I realized that he was a Target employee. He had dark brown hair and was somewhat tall, maybe 6 feet. He walked up to me and said hi. Then he asked me if I needed help finding anything. I said no thanks, I know where everything I'm getting is, but I appreciate the help. He then offered to show me some items that were on sale, which I also declined. He said okay, and then just kind of walked off. Now, nothing was strange about that interaction, but then I continued my shopping and took maybe 15 more minutes inside the store. Then I headed to the checkouts, paid for my things, and left. I was parked towards one side of the store and about halfway back in the parking lot. I walked up to my car and then began unloading all of my things into the trunk of my car. When I was doing this, again, out of almost nowhere, I heard somebody approaching me from behind. I turned around to see the same guy who spoke to me inside of Target, but he was not wearing his Target employee uniform. Now he was just wearing sweatpants and a black jacket with the hood up. I still instantly recognized him and was very confused. The man asked me if I could give him a ride. He was like, "Hi, I was wondering if you could please give me a ride." I told him that I would not be able to do that. The guy seemed really sketchy, and that's not even because of the fact that he had just been working at Target like 15 minutes ago. After I said no, he was still standing there, and I could tell that he was going to ask me again. I said, "Don't you work here?" I was thinking maybe it would be better for him to ask a coworker for a ride or something. He said no, he didn't work there. I told him that he had just talked to me in the store a little bit earlier, but he completely denied it. Now, I know for a fact 100% that it was him. Now he was only seeming more sketchy to me. Then he told me that he didn't need a ride very far, just a little ways. I told him once again that I couldn't do it. Then I firmly turned and walked away from him and for my car. I got inside and then closed and locked the door. The man started to walk over to my driver's side door. Luckily, nobody was parked directly in front of me and I could pull right out. I drove off, leaving him standing there. After leaving, I wondered what his deal was. Why was he pretending to work at Target and then asking me for a ride? I really have no idea, but the whole thing still seems pretty sketchy to me. I'm glad that I got away from him. This happened about 10 years ago when I was still in high school. I lived at home with my parents and my brother. I was about 16 years old, and my bedroom was on the back side of the house on the second floor. So one night during the summertime, everyone else had already gone to bed. I didn't have to be up early or anything because it was the summertime. My brother would often stay up late playing video games in his room, and I would not stay up late quite as much, but occasionally I would watch shows or something until pretty late at night. That's what I was doing on this night. My parents both had jobs, so they were probably asleep by 11. I remember that I was hearing my brother playing video games on the other side of the wall in his room until about 1 a.m. Then the noises stopped, so I assumed that he went to bed. I was sort of sleepy, but really into the show that I was watching, so I continued. I was sitting in my bed, which was very comfortable, and watching the TV that was mounted on my wall. My lights were all off except for a small lamp on my nightstand. So I continued watching my show and was pretty relaxed. About an hour later, at roughly 2 o'clock in the morning, another one of the episodes had ended, so I finally decided to go to sleep. I got up from my bed to use the bathroom. However, when I got up, I noticed something out the window. The window was at the back side of my room and had been behind me. It looked out to the backyard, which was maybe a half acre or so. There were some trees and bushes, as well as plants scattered around, but there was also a good amount of open space. There was a man standing at the back end of the yard. I couldn't believe it at first. I kept looking at him. That's when I noticed that it looked like he was wearing a Target employee uniform. It even appeared that he had a name tag on, but it was too far away and too dark to even remotely see what the name said. The man looked young, like maybe a teenager or like 20 years old at the oldest. He wore the full Target uniform of a red shirt and tan khaki pants, like I said, and had short blonde hair. I had never seen him before and wondered what on earth was going on. The guy was just kind of standing there looking towards our house. I didn't know if he was going to break in or something. I thought about waking up my parents or brother, but I first decided to go downstairs and turn on a light to see if that would scare him off. All the lights in the house were off except for my small light in my room. I went downstairs and then towards the dining room area, which had some windows out to the back. When I got there, the guy was still standing there in the yard. I went over and turned on the back patio light to the backyard, and when I did, I saw the guy look at it and then look to the windows. I ducked down so he wouldn't see me. When I looked back up a few seconds later, I saw that the guy was now walking away. He went over to the side of the backyard and then went out of sight, appearing to leave. After looking out back for a while, I finally went upstairs. Then I went back to my bedroom and looked outside the windows there for another 10 minutes or so. I didn't see the guy at all, and I figured that he was now gone. I didn't know what that was all about. At 2 o'clock in the morning, some random Target worker goes into our backyard and just looks around at our house. Was he planning on breaking in? Did he live nearby? I didn't know, but it was sure sketchy. We had never had anything like that happen before to my knowledge. The neighborhood was pretty quiet and known for being a safe place. So after that, I was able to go to sleep. By the next day, I pretty much forgot about it. I brought it up to my parents and brother, and we talked about it for a little bit, but nothing else really could be done. There was no evidence of the guy in the yard, and he didn't try to break in or anything. I wondered, though, if he actually worked at Target, or if he was just wearing that uniform for some reason. There was one Target that was pretty close by to where we lived. I would go there a decent amount, not like every day, but it was one of the main shopping places that I went to. I had never noticed that particular guy, though. So it was maybe 2 or 3 weeks later. I went back to the local Target. I was just getting a couple of things and was not there for very long. It was a weekend, I believe a Saturday, so I recall that the store was very busy. When I was checking out, I noticed a long ways away what looked like the same guy. He was working at the Target doing I'm not sure what because he wasn't working at a cash register, but he was walking in front of the check lanes far away from me. When I noticed him, I kept looking at him because I was sure that it was the same guy. After I was staring at him for maybe 5 seconds, he looked over and noticed me. When he did, I remember that he kind of stopped and then turned around. He started walking in the opposite direction, and as soon as I was done checking out, I turned and walked the other way and left the store. I wasn't sure what to do. Should I have reported him? After leaving, I was about 99% sure that it was the same guy. I told my parents when I got home, but they weren't sure what to do about it either. After that, the guy never showed up in our backyard again. And another strange thing is that I never noticed him working at the Target again either, and I went there all the time. It was very strange.
I worked at Target about 2 years ago. My main job was to stock shelves in the grocery aisles. I would spend a lot of time in the back rooms bringing items and occasionally removing them from shelves. One day, I was working an early shift. We opened at 8 a.m. and it was about 8:15. We had just opened, so the store wasn't that busy yet. I was the only person working in the back at the time, and my job was to open boxes and bring things out to the sales floor. I had to throw some things away, so I went around the corner, and on my way back I heard a noise coming from behind some crates. At first, I thought someone else came back to work with me. "Hey," I said. There was no response. I walked over to the crates, and as I got close, I saw someone run to another stack of boxes that were next to me. That led to a bunch of little aisles where we kept a lot of products before they went out to the floor. I thought it must have been someone pranking me. I laughed and followed behind the boxes to the aisles. The aisles had lots of potential hiding places, so after looking around for a few seconds, I gave up and went back to work. About an hour later, I was still the only person working back there, and I heard a large crashing noise coming from the aisles. I walked over to see a bunch of items had fallen off the shelves. I looked around, and just then, I saw from behind a box a head of a man ducked down next to it. He was dirty and had a long beard. I said in a firm voice that customers were not allowed back here and he needed to get out. He just turned and ran again. I chased after him all the way to the side entrance to the back. He sprinted out the back room and into the grocery section of the store and out the front door. The customers looked shocked at what they had seen. I called store security, and they came back with me to investigate. We found out that quite a few items were missing from the back shelves. There were empty wrappers from food he was eating all over the place. He made quite a mess. We figured it must have been a homeless man that somehow snuck into the back room and stayed there all night hidden, despite us having an overnight crew that works. As far as I know, he was able to get away with it.
This happened a few years ago when I went to Target. I don't really remember what I went to Target to get, but I don't think I got too many items. I know that it was later at night though, and right before they closed. Back then, I believe they closed at 11 p.m., and I went there at probably like 10 or 10:30. I just know that they were closing really soon. I shopped in the quiet store for a while and got a few things. After I checked out and left the store, I went to my car in the parking lot. That's when one of my good friends called me. There are a few good friends that I have that will call any time, and I will call them whenever as well. If it's late at night or early in the morning, it isn't a big deal. So I was talking with them on the phone, and we were having a good conversation. I was very focused on the conversation and did not drive home right away. I was just sitting in the parking lot on my phone talking. The parking lot was obviously almost empty because of the store closing soon. After sitting there in my car for probably 10 minutes or so and talking on the phone, I noticed that a car pulled into the parking space directly next to mine to the left. I noticed it, but didn't really think anything of it. I was fully engaged in the conversation that I was having with my friend. We talked for about another 10 minutes, and then finally, we hung up. I then realized that nobody had gotten out of the car that was parked next to me. I really hadn't even been thinking about it. That's when I thought it was strange that the car had parked next to me in the first place. But now, the driver was still inside of it. I looked over, and to my surprise, the driver was already looking back at me. It was a man with a hat and sunglasses on. He was just staring in my direction from the driver's seat. His car was running as well as mine. I found this really weird, so I decided to back out and go home. As soon as I left the parking space though, the car that was parked next to me started to back up. I drove my car to leave the parking lot, wondering if the car would follow me. It did, and we both drove to the end of the parking lot, and when I got to the exit, the car suddenly sped up and pulled around me as if it was going to pass. Then it cut in front of me and slammed on its brakes. We both came to a stop, and I was now blocked in, and the car sat there for a few seconds. I honked my horn, wondering what on earth they were doing. Then the front driver's door of the car in front of me opened up quickly. The driver came out and began taking a few steps in my direction. I wasn't going to stay around, and I put my car into reverse. When I backed away, he still walked closer to me. Once I had made it far enough away from him, I put my car back into drive and sped off into another direction. The car, thankfully, did not follow me. I left through a different exit in the parking lot and made it away. I never found out who that guy was. I think he was probably going to try to rob me or something like that. I worked at Target years ago. I mostly worked in the furniture and home decor department of the store. That area was towards the middle and the back, and I worked pretty random hours because I was part-time. One Friday afternoon, it was probably about 2 p.m. or so. I worked until 6, and to that point, things had gone pretty smooth and the store was not too busy. I was walking past the electronics section when a man approached me. I turned around to see a tall man with a winter hat on, and he asked me why there were no iPads left. Immediately, I didn't like his tone. He seemed angry and came off as rude. I told the man I wasn't sure because I didn't work in electronics, but I could check to see if we had any available in the store. The man told me that it said online we had one, but when he went to look, there were none. He then said that the electronics guy was no help to him. I looked up right there if we had any iPads in stock, and we didn't have any. I showed this to the man and apologized to him, saying that we didn't have any in stock at this location, but I could check if they had any at nearby Target stores. The man was not satisfied by this. He said to me that he had just looked online, and it said we had one in stock here, and then he asked me if I was calling him a liar. I tried to calm the man down, and said maybe somebody had just purchased our last one. He kept asking me to get one from the back after that, as if we had a bunch of iPads in the back room. Basically, the man was becoming more and more angry no matter what I said. He started to say that I was lying, and that we must have a bunch of idiots working here. This is when I told the man that he would just have to leave the store because we couldn't have him talking like that. At first, he refused, but after a few seconds, the man finally just turned around and walked in the other direction. I was so glad that he was finally leaving, and I went back to doing what I originally was. I made my way a few aisles over and was organizing one of the shelves of home decorations. Probably 10 minutes later, I saw the man again. He entered the aisle that I was working in, and he just stood there looking at me. It was as if he was just waiting for me to say something. I really didn't want to, and I ignored him for the first few seconds after noticing him. But finally, I turned to him and asked what he wanted. He was still angry. He started walking over to me, basically saying the same things that he had before. I didn't want to be a part of this any longer, and I said that he needed to leave the store or I would call security. That seemed to stop him because I left the aisle and the man stayed there. I walked over and went into the back room area of the store. As I walked through the main walkway in the back, I heard the door open and shut to the store behind me. I looked back a ways and saw the guy had entered the back room as well and was now following me. I kept walking and hoped to see somebody else who was working back there, but I didn't. The guy was walking behind me and seemed to be getting closer. I turned around for a brief second and told him that he wasn't allowed to be back here. He didn't say anything and kept walking quickly in my direction. I took my walkie from my side and called for security and gave them the location of where I was going. The guy got closer and closer. Pretty soon, he was only a few feet behind me. I had almost made it to the door. When I finally made it to another door that went back into the store, the guy reached out and grabbed my arm. At around the same time, I opened the doors and went out. When I did, that's where security was. They were able to get the man to leave, and I went back to my department. It was crazy why the guy kept following me, and I'm not really sure what his problem was. I worked at a Super Target for almost 2 years. I quit just a couple of months ago and have gotten another job since then. But working at Target was good for the most part. When I was first hired, I started out as a cashier. But after a few months, I changed and worked around the store and only did cashier when an extra one was needed. Usually that was just at busier times or if somebody called in. So this story is something that happened probably about a year ago maybe. I was working at night and things were pretty quiet. I was back sort of near the electronics department, which is at the back center of the store. It was then that a man approached me and said that he needed help with something. The guy was sort of tall and I remember was wearing a black sweatshirt. I asked him how I could help and he said that he was looking for some plates. He asked me if I could show him where they were and said that he had been looking around for a while. I said that I could and I knew exactly where they were. I understood how it might be hard for him to find them. We would remodel our store and organize it quite often, and we're always updating things. The plates and silverware were in the far back corner of the store, which is generally a quieter area. The man followed me as I walked over there, which didn't take very long. Soon we made it to the general area. When I was approaching the aisle at the far back corner, I noticed something a little bit strange. There were 3 other men standing around near the plates. Each of them was wearing a ski mask over their heads. I couldn't tell who they were or anything because of this. They were all just standing there, facing me, and when I started to approach, they looked at me. This seemed very suspicious and gave me a bad feeling. Why were they all wearing ski masks, and what were they doing? They didn't seem to be looking at anything, but when I came into view, they were suddenly all looking at me. I only saw them for probably 3 or 4 seconds, and then I turned and walked down the very next aisle to get out of there. When I did, I heard the first guy who had been following me say to wait, but I didn't. I just kept walking and got out of that area. I felt better when I was a few aisles away. The guy did not keep following me and I was now by myself. I didn't bother to look back to see if the guys were still there or not. I went to another area of the store and went back to work doing what I had been going to do before the guy asked me for help. As I was over there, I was wondering what exactly was going on. I still didn't know why those guys were wearing masks. Most people don't just go into a store wearing ski masks unless they're planning to rob the place or something. I looked around as I worked, but I didn't see any of the other guys. After several minutes, I decided to go back over and see if they were still there. I'm not sure if I was just really curious or what. I walked over to the corner of the store, and when I got there, saw nobody. There wasn't really anybody at all in that immediate area. By then, it was probably about 9 p.m., and there weren't many shoppers at all. The ones that were inside the store were mostly on the other side where groceries were. I worked until 10 p.m., so I only had about an hour left and went back to work in the meantime. During that final hour of work, I did not see any of the men. Then, at 10 o'clock, the store closed, and I walked up to the front, clocked out, and left. There was a door in the middle for employees only where I would leave. As I left the store and started walking through the parking lot to my vehicle, there were still a decent amount of cars there. Quite a few people worked overnights at Target, and some others hadn't left yet that were still there. But I hadn't even made it that far when I spotted a car with about 4 people in it. I immediately noticed the men wearing masks as the same men who had been inside the store earlier. The car was a ways away, but I saw the people inside turn and look at me as I approached. I turned right back around when I saw this and walked for the employee door that I had come out of. The employee door was only about 20 feet away, and when I got back to it, somebody else was leaving. That allowed me to go back inside of the store. When I was in there, I went into the break room and just waited. I had a really bad feeling about those guys. I wasn't sure why they were still there either. About 15 minutes later, I went back out and checked, and the men were now gone. After that, I walked out to my vehicle and left. I never saw those people again after that, although the only one I would have recognized was the guy who had asked me for help. Everybody else had been wearing a ski mask over their face. My theory is that it was some type of a setup. I was lucky to get away as early as I did. One Saturday morning a few years ago, I went shopping at Target. That was kind of my routine. I would go shopping every Saturday morning at about 8 or 9 o'clock and get groceries and the things that I needed for the week. I would usually get most of the same things, and at that time the store was generally not busy yet. So on this particular Saturday morning, it was like any other. I drove to Target, which was only like 5 minutes away, went inside and started shopping. Like usual, the store was not that busy. I was inside for maybe 15 or 20 minutes getting everything that I needed. Then I checked out and left. I walked back to my car in the parking lot, got inside, and drove home. Nothing about the experience stood out to me in any way. However, several hours after arriving back home, something strange happened. I got this notification on my phone from Instagram. It said somebody had tagged me in their post. However, the username was one that I had never heard of before. It was like random words and then numbers that didn't really make sense. I looked at the post, and it was a few slides of pictures and then a video. They were all of me at Target earlier that morning. A few were of me inside the store. None were really that great of quality, and I was partly obstructed by an aisle in some of them, so this person may have sort of been hiding. Then there was a video of me walking in the parking lot to my car. The video appeared to have been taken from inside another vehicle and slightly zoomed in. When I saw this, I instantly felt very creeped out. I did not know who had done this or why. I looked at the user and it was their only post. They were not following anybody and had 0 followers. It was like they created their account just to post that. I didn't know what to do. Later on, I wanted to figure it out, so I went back to Instagram, but it was all gone. The post and user and everything had been deleted. I was so creeped out. I never ended up finding out who did it or why. After that, I changed my routine for a while. Whoever did that could have known that I shopped at Target at around the same time every Saturday morning, and I hadn't noticed anything strange because they seemed to have been sort of hiding. It's fairly easy to film someone with a phone and not look too suspicious. I'm just glad that nothing else creepy happened after that. Still, I wonder about it sometimes who did it. I worked at Target as a cart pusher a long time ago when I was younger. I worked mostly night shifts or afternoon to night shifts unless it was the weekends. Then I would work mornings. One time I was working until sometime a little bit later at night. I was out in the parking lot by myself collecting carts from the returns and bringing them back in the store. The store was usually busy in the early evening and there were a lot of carts in the parking lot for a while. So, as it got later at night, things quieted down. I could relax a little more as I had gotten the carts pretty full on both sides. I went to the grocery side of the store, which was always more busy. There were still carts out in the parking lot, so I started going out and getting them by hand, because the machine died and was charging. One time I brought the carts in, and I noticed a man sitting by himself in the Target cafe. I don't know if you remember, but many Targets used to have cafeterias where you could get food and snacks. There would also be tables that you could sit at. Ours was closed by now because I think it closed at 9 p.m., so the lights were off and it was empty except for this one guy sitting inside. I remember that he was wearing black pants and a jacket with a black hood. He was just sitting there kind of looking around, but mostly downward, and he had no Target bags or food or anything. I just thought that it looked kind of sketchy, but mostly thought nothing of it at all. I went back outside and got more carts. Over the next hour or so, I pretty much got in all the carts from the parking lot. The man was still there the entire time until the end. Every time that I would come in, I would see him still sitting there. Then, when I brought the last of the carts in, he was gone. Still, I didn't think much of it at all. At that point, I was basically ready to go home. I only had about 10 minutes left of my shift, and the carts were good, so I went to see if anything else needed to be done. The baskets were fine, but I saw that there was a flat at the end of the check lanes, so I decided to put it back. The flats all went in the back room area of the back side of the store near receiving, so I took the flat and wheeled it all the way there. When I got into the back room, there was nobody in the immediate area. Things were very quiet by this hour. I put the flat back in its spot and started heading back to the doors to go clock out. But before I left the back room area, I heard somebody approach from behind me around the corner. They were probably about 50 feet away, and I was curious as to who it was. I was friends with a couple of the guys who worked back there sometimes. I looked and saw that same sketchy guy wearing all black. He was just standing in the back room looking at me. As soon as I was looking back at him, he quickly dipped around the corner. I knew that he didn't work there and was not supposed to be in the back. It was clearly an employees-only area. I did not go after him, but I left the back room area to find my manager. He was up at the front end of the store, and I told him what was going on. Before I clocked out, he asked me to show him where the guy went, so we both walked towards the back room again. When we got there, I went around the corner to where the guy had gone. We did not immediately see him. I wasn't sure if he had left or what. We walked a little farther though, and then heard somebody moving. He was in one of the aisles back there. In a Target back room, it's hard to explain how it looks. There are aisles, but they're not like in the store. They're much higher, and it appears way more cluttered, even though it's very organized. So we could sort of see the guy in one of the upcoming aisles, but just barely. He was moving farther down it. My manager called out and said, "Hey, you're not allowed to be back here. It's for employees only." The man cut him off, and what he said really shocked me. He said, "Don't come any closer or I'll shoot you." We both froze in our tracks. It was very unexpected. My manager said, "Okay, we're not coming any closer. We're going to walk away." The man said nothing. We both slowly moved back, and I was terrified. I didn't know how legit of a threat it was, but obviously we had to take it serious. We still couldn't see the guy hardly at all, just enough to tell that he was a few aisles up. We walked back, and when we got to the corner, I felt a huge relief. Then we practically sprinted back out into the store. My manager called on his walkie-talkie what was going on. There were hardly any shoppers and not many employees there at that hour either, so they ended up evacuating everybody from the store and calling the cops. I went out into the parking lot and waited with everybody else. The cops got there and were inside for a while. Eventually, the man was arrested. He did not turn out to have a gun, so I guess he just made it up to threaten us. I'm not sure what he was trying to do or why he went to the back room, but it was by far my scariest experience working at Target though. I'm a former Target employee and worked in the clothing department mainly. I worked there for 7 months total, and I liked working there. It was a good job, and most of the coworkers, as well as customers, were nice. But there was one coworker that I had some problems with. It was a guy named Ed, and he worked in the electronics department. Over time, I got to know him a little bit. Not that well, though. There's a lot of turnover at a store like Target, but also many employees that stick around. So the people in all departments that worked there for most of the time that I did, I either recognized or got to know. I only spoke to Ed briefly once or twice for the first several months. I was much closer with many other coworkers. But one time, I was taking my break and was by myself in the break room. I think it was a little bit later at night, and that's why nobody else was in there. Well, just a couple of minutes after I got in there, Ed entered and then started talking to me. He was friendly for the most part and asked me some things about myself, and I was friendly back to him. But then, like 5 minutes into the conversation, He asked if I wanted to hang out with him and suggested that he could come over to my house. Now, I really didn't want to hang out with him, and I especially didn't want him coming over. I said I didn't think that I could, and then I changed the subject because it was kind of awkward. We talked for the rest of my break. Well, it was mostly Ed talking, and I was just listening. Finally, I was back to work. I didn't really see Ed for the rest of my shift that night, but over the next week or two, Ed started to talk to me more and more. He would go out of his way to see me, and he asked me again if he could come over to my house. He was starting to be a bit of a creep, to be honest with you. After that, though, I kind of stopped seeing him. I didn't really think about it until I heard that he had been fired. I didn't get any details on why he had been fired or exactly when. I also didn't really give it that much thought, other than realizing that he wouldn't be talking to me anymore. So for the next week or so, work went on as usual. But one day, I was not at work, but back home in my apartment. I got a text message from Ed. At first, I didn't know who it was, because I didn't recognize the number. I did not have Ed's number, but I was part of a large Target group chat with a bunch of us coworkers. Anybody in it could see my number, and I guess Ed was still a part of it. He texted me saying that it was him, and told me that he was going to come over to my house. I was thinking, what's up with this guy and going to my house? I texted him back saying, please don't come to my house, Ed. It was nice to work with you at Target, but I don't think we should hang out. I expected him to understand, but apparently he didn't. Now, he didn't respond to what I said, so I wasn't sure if he was mad or not, or if he even read it. But a few hours went by, and that night I was still at home. I lived by myself in my apartment, which was on the first floor of my building. It was probably like 9 o'clock at night when Ed texted me back finally. He said that he was at my house. When I read those words, I instantly started sweating, and my heart began racing. How did he know where I lived? Was he really at my house? I started to text back, but didn't know what to say. I went over to my door and looked out the peephole into the hallway. Nobody was there. Maybe he was at my apartment, but not in the building yet. I looked out of my back window as well and didn't see anything. I hoped that he wasn't actually there, but it was a really strange thing to say if he wasn't. Finally, I texted back, telling Ed that I wasn't at home. I thought that maybe that would make him leave if he was here, or deter him from coming over if he wasn't. But he responded by saying, yes, you are home. I saw you. When I read that text, I started looking around like a paranoid person. My mind was racing. I was thinking crazy thoughts, like maybe he was already inside of my apartment, hiding under my bed or something. But he wasn't. I looked in all of my rooms. I then texted him back, asking him where he was. He responded by saying, at my house. I was confused by this, and I looked out of the peephole and windows again without seeing him. I started to think that maybe he was just joking. At least, that's what I was trying to convince myself. I went back over to my peephole again and looked out of it. I was looking out of it for like a minute straight, but still, nobody was there. I turned around, and then I saw him. He was standing on my patio, right outside of my sliding door, and looking in. I screamed like crazy and then ran from my bedroom. I locked myself inside of it and then called the police. A few moments later, I heard a knocking on my sliding door. I got another text from Ed telling me to let him in and asking me why I screamed. I ignored it and told the 911 dispatcher what the situation was. They told me that an officer would be there shortly. Ed then tried calling me, but I didn't answer and ignored it. He texted me several more times, and I put my phone down because I didn't even want to look at it. It was then that I started to hear a loud banging coming from my sliding door. He really wanted me to let him in. This went on for the next several minutes. It honestly felt like forever. At last, the police arrived. I heard Ed talking with them loudly, and I left the bathroom. I soon saw him talking with officers, and they eventually got him to leave. Then I spoke with the officers, and I told my side of the story. Ed ended up getting trespassed from my apartment's property, and he was told not to come back. Luckily, I haven't seen him since then. I haven't heard from him either. Obviously, I blocked his number and stuff. Hopefully, I never hear from him again. I worked at Target, pushing carts out in the parking lot for a little bit more than a year. The Target that I worked at was very large, so I was kept busy most of the time. This particular story took place one night when I was working until 11 p.m., which is when we closed. I don't remember exactly when I started, but by the ends of my shifts, my legs would be so tired from walking so much. I would end up going all around the parking lot and even to the sides of the buildings a little bit. I had to get every single cart from the parking lot or else my boss would yell at me. And people wouldn't always put carts back where they belonged in the cart return areas either. They would be lazy and leave them next to their parking space, or others would try to leave it by a curb. Each time I worked, there would be at least one that would somehow wind up at the far corner of the parking lot or on the side of the building. A couple of times, carts even got into nearby businesses' parking lots, which drove my boss crazy. So because of this, I was always keeping an eye out for carts anywhere they could possibly be. My eyes were trained to see the bright red color of the shopping carts and to go and get it wherever it was. On this night, when things were quieting down at maybe 8 p.m. or so, I was walking around the parking lot. I always liked it when things quieted down. Obviously, it was less busy, which meant less carts, but also I would not have to rush or worry about cars driving by me as much as I pushed the carts around. It was during this time that I was walking to the west side of the building just to make sure that there were no carts there. Along that side of the building was a quiet road leading to the back where some deliveries were made. It wasn't really used for typical cars. Next to that road was a grassy area with some trees, and then next to that was the road where cars would take to leave. As I looked over there, I saw there was a man there, and I wasn't really sure what he was doing. It was very unusual for people to be there, because there wasn't really any reason for it. The guy did not see me, and I didn't think that much of it. When I saw there were no carts over there, I just walked away. I went around the rest of the parking lot collecting shopping carts here and there. But about 30 minutes later, I was still in the parking lot, and I was walking to get some carts. I saw a man entering the Target store, and it was the same guy who I had seen on the side of the building. But now, he was wearing a Target employee uniform. He had a red shirt and khakis on, and he hadn't been wearing that before. I thought it was a little bit odd because I didn't recognize him either. But overall, I didn't question it. I didn't know all of the employees because it's a really large store. We were also always hiring new people. I had too much work to do, and after I brought in the carts, I had to go and clean the restrooms. My boss would always get mad if I missed an hour of cleaning the restrooms. At night, it would finally be easy to do so because there would be customers always coming in and out earlier. After that, I went back into the parking lot to continue working. The next stretch of time was pretty uneventful. The store only got quieter and quieter, and I was able to get most of the carts back inside of the store. But sometime later, I'm not really sure exactly how long, I saw several police cars arriving to the Target. Some had flashing lights. I was very curious as to what exactly was going on, but I didn't bother to ask. Some officers entered the store, and other cars went around to the backside. Eventually, my curiosity got the better of me, and I went inside and asked my boss what was going on. What I was told was that the store had been robbed. Apparently, items had been taken from the back room areas of the store and moved out through the back door. This was one of the doors used for deliveries. I would later find out that the man that I had seen on the side of the Target and walking inside had been part of it. He pretended to work there and went into the back room and opened up the door. There were guys waiting in a car right outside. He put a bunch of items inside and then they left. I ended up talking with police about what I had witnessed, but after that night, I didn't hear much about it again. I'm not sure if they found those guys or what. I just hope that my information helped. I'm not sure if I'm glad the guy didn't see me or not when I spotted him at the side of the building. This is something that took place when I was a kid. I think it was the late 90s or maybe the very early 2000s. I'm not sure the exact year or exactly how old I was. If I had to guess, I was maybe 10 or 12, but I could be wrong. I just know that I remember the details of this particular incident pretty well, and it's something that I will never forget. So I used to tag along with my mother when she went shopping all the time. She would go to Target probably the most, and I liked that store. They were set up nicely, and I enjoyed hanging out in the toys section when I was younger. Then, as I got a little bit older, I would go to the electronics or the video games. All those aisles were fairly close to each other, so when my mother shopped, I would hang out over there. She knew where I would be, and it was usually a pretty good time. One time we went to Target a little bit later at night than usual. The store was pretty quiet, but like normal, I went off to the electronics department and my mother shopped somewhere else in the store. I remember that I was looking at the video games for a while, and then I went into another aisle that was one of the first aisles sort of off the electronics area. It was pretty close by, and they had all the television sets that were for sale playing not far away. Then there was another TV in this aisle that was not for sale but hanging from the ceiling. It usually played advertisements like Target commercials or music videos or new movies that were out and whatnot. As I was in the aisle, I heard it playing like normal. I was looking at something on one of the shelves. Then, I suddenly heard the sound from the TV turn into this weird screeching sound and then some static. All of a sudden, I heard this creepy and eerie music. I looked over to the TV. No longer was it playing Target advertising, but now the screen was really dark. It just didn't seem right. After a few seconds, a man emerged onto the screen, but you could only sort of see his head. It was so dark that it was really just the basic shape of the guy's head, and you couldn't make out any details. He started speaking, and it sounded like he was using a voice changer. I was frozen with fear, standing in the aisle all by myself. The guy started talking, almost rambling. I couldn't really tell what he was talking about. I was either too young to understand or too creeped out, and I really don't remember anymore. After standing there watching it for like 30 seconds, I wanted to leave, but I was almost too scared to move. There was nobody else around in the immediate area at all. Finally, I came to my senses. The thing was still going, and I turned, and I'm sure I sprinted out of there as fast as I could. I literally ran through the store until I saw another shopper. Then I felt better, but I continued walking really fast until I found my mother. I told her about it, and I was really scared. My mom told me to show her, so we went back to the aisle, even though I really didn't want to from being so creeped out. When we got back there though, the TV was just off. The other electronics were playing the normal advertisement stuff, but this TV was just off. My mother finished her shopping and then we left. I was really freaked out, but after leaving the store, felt better. Nothing like that ever happened again. To this day, I still wonder about it though. Did somebody hack the TV thing at Target? I'm 100% sure that was not some kind of advertisement. Maybe it was someone's idea of a prank. It still creeps me out to think about it though. I'm a former Target employee. I worked there 5 years ago, pushing carts in the parking lot. This was one of my favorite jobs that I've had so far, to be honest. It was pretty enjoyable and easy work. However, I do have one really scary story to tell. This is something that still creeps me out when I think about it. I worked at a super Target and it was in a busy area. The store and the parking lot were very big, and they were close to other stores and restaurants that were close by. This made work challenging occasionally because of how busy it would get. One time, I was working a night shift, and it had been really busy in the day earlier, but by now, things were very calm. It felt like the calm after the storm, because the carts were scattered throughout the parking lot, not just in the corrals. This was typical on busy days. When I had the time later, I would go all around the parking lot and retrieve the carts that were not in the corrals. I would also bring all the ones that were in the corrals back to the store as well. Obviously, with how busy it had been earlier, I hadn't been able to keep up with the parking lot as perfectly as I would like. So, it was probably about 9 p.m. or so. I went to the northeast corner of the parking lot. There was a cart that was against the curb at the corner the farthest away from the store. I walked over and got the cart. As soon as I was grabbing it, I noticed an SUV pulling into this area of the parking lot. There was an entrance/exit right there as well. The SUV did not keep driving though. Instead, it stopped right in front of me. I found this kind of strange, but I just got the cart and started walking back to the store. But that's when I heard a voice call out, "Hey!" I looked back and saw a man getting out of the SUV. The vehicle was not parked in a parking space, but just parked there, partly covering 2 different spaces and the driving area. The guy said to me that maybe I could help him with something. I stopped with the cart and looked back to him. I asked him what he needed help with. The man waved me over and I started walking to him. He said that he didn't know if I knew much about cars or not, but he didn't, and something weird was happening with his. The man was short, but looked sort of strong. I did know a little bit about cars, but not a whole lot. I was hoping that I would be able to help the man with this problem though. Then, the man asked me to get inside the backseat of his car and listen to the weird noise it made when he drove. The question really seemed to come out of left field. It took me by surprise, and it also seemed really sketchy. I changed my mind suddenly. "Actually, I really don't know anything about cars," I said. Then I turned around to get my cart and started walking back over to it. The man told me to wait, but I didn't. I kept walking, making my way back to the Target. I heard footsteps of the man coming after me, though. This was really strange. I sped up. The guy behind me seemed to speed up as well. At that point, I decided to just start sprinting. I felt like I was in danger, and I knew if I made it in the Target, I would be safe. I ran all the way there, sprinting with the cart, and the man could not keep up and stopped chasing me. When I got back inside, I decided to work on the other end of the parking lot for a while, and that's exactly what I did, and I also tried to stay close to the building as I collected carts from the other end. Everything went fine. I looked out to the other side of the parking lot where the man and his car had been, and I didn't see him or the SUV. He must have left, which was good. After working for a while, it was time for my final break of the day. It was a 15-minute break. I walked back inside and into the break room. There, I sat on my phone, scrolling through social media and Snapchatting with friends. At that time, I was the only person in the break room. With it being late, there was an overlap of people at the end of their evening shifts or at the beginning of their overnight shifts. Nobody else was taking their break. This was fine with me. About halfway through, I heard the door to the break room open and close. There was a little hallway with a closet that led into the break room. I expected somebody to enter the room, but no one did. I didn't think anything of it. I continued sitting in my chair and looking at my phone, but several moments later, I had a strange feeling. It was like the feeling that I was being watched. I usually don't get this feeling, so when I did, I turned around. That's when I saw the guy who had chased after me earlier. He was standing in the entrance of the break room, looking right at me. Then he started walking closer to me. I got up and once again sprinted away from the man. I ran out the other exit of the break room, which led to an employees-only area where you punched in, and there was a desk there as well. Nobody was back there at the time. There was also a door leading to outside, and I ran out of it and back into the parking lot. I ran around to the other entrance door and quickly found one of the managers. I told them the whole story, but when they went into the break room, the man was gone. He must have exited after I had. Luckily, I didn't have much time left on the clock. I worked very carefully for the next 30 minutes or so. Then I punched out and went home. I never saw the man again. After this incident, I worked at Target for quite a while. Nothing like that ever happened again, which I'm glad to say. I work at Target, and I'm going to tell you something that happened a couple of months ago. I've been working there for 6 months now, and I'm mainly a cashier. I do some other things around the store as well, though. For the entire time that I've been an employee, I've also been part-time. Most weeks, I get between 20 and 40 hours, with my record being 36. I work a lot of times at night, and our store closes at 10 p.m. But when I get to work, it's usually about 2 p.m. or so things are busier then. I have always parked at the far back of the parking lot and away from the store. We are not required to do so, but it's a habit for me. Plus, when I get there, the parking lot is often a lot busier. So one time, I was working 2 o'clock to 10 on a Saturday. When I arrived at Target at about 1:45 p.m., the parking lot was especially packed. Weekends are typically much busier than weekdays, and I don't remember if we had a sale going on or something, but it was really busy. I parked all the way at the back corner of the parking lot. The Target parking lot is connected with some other businesses as well. There was a Chili's restaurant that the parking lot connected very close to where I had parked. I got out and walked inside Target. Then I started my shift. It went pretty fast in the beginning. Over time, things slowed down, and eventually it became nighttime. The last couple of hours dragged on, but at 10 p.m. I was finally off. I clocked out and left the store. By now, it was nighttime and the parking lot was basically empty. There were a few cars in the middle, and I could see my car all by itself in the back far corner. I walked out to it and got inside. I drive a smaller SUV called a Jeep Cherokee. When I got inside my car, I did what I usually do. I have a habit of going on my phone and checking the text and stuff that I got during work, or at least during the last few hours of work. Then I drive home. On this night, as I sat in my car in the quiet parking lot, I noticed a man walking. He He was coming out of the Chili's parking lot, which was also very quiet now at this hour. The man had a backpack on and started going closer to my car. I was expecting him to walk through the Target parking lot and then go who knows where. It seemed like he was going to go past my car, but I noticed him looking over at me a few times. When the man got directly behind my car, he then stopped. Then he got right up to the back of my window and started looking inside of it. I thought that this was really weird and didn't know what this guy was doing. I wasn't really sure what to do either. I couldn't drive away because he was blocking me. The guy was looking directly into the rear window to my car. I hoped that he would just walk away, but he didn't at first. The guy remained there for a very uncomfortable amount of time. I didn't want to open the window and ask him what he was doing or get out or anything. Instead, I just watched him and waited. I'm guessing that he was there for about 2 minutes, but obviously it felt like much longer. Finally, at last, the man moved away from my window and started walking away towards the Target. Right then and there, I should have backed away and left, but I didn't. The guy got about 15 feet from my car and then took his backpack off. I'm not really sure why I was still watching him, other than I was just curious. He opened up the backpack and then pulled out what appeared to be a hammer. Then he suddenly started charging at me. He was going straight towards my driver's door. I had little to no time to react. When he reached me, he swung the hammer at my driver's window and the window broke. By then, I was finally able to get the car into reverse and hit the gas. The man swung the hammer again, but only hit part of the front window, which cracked part of it, but the window didn't break. I sped out of the Target parking lot like a maniac and then called the police. I drove home and just hoped that the police would catch the guy. I was told later on that they did in fact find him. Apparently, he had smashed several windows of other vehicles in the area. I had been the only person inside of a vehicle at the time that the window got smashed, though. It remains one of the scariest things to ever happen to me.
This is a story of something that happened when I was shopping at Target a couple of months ago. I was at a super Target, which is a bigger version of a regular Target, and I was shopping at one not too far from my house. It was probably like 8 o'clock at night or so, and I was shopping for mainly toothpaste and soap, which I had run out of. There was a back wall where most of those type of products were, and when I was in that area, I was looking around and happened to glance behind me. The store was pretty quiet, and not many other people were shopping at all. But there was another aisle nearby that had like makeup and skin products, and in that aisle was just one guy. He was wearing a hat and had an old-looking backpack with him, which is what I immediately noticed. But then, I saw the guy take something off the shelf and just stick it into his backpack. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The guy had to know that I could see him, or at least that I was there. I kept watching, and the guy pulled about 4 or 5 more things right off the shelf and put them into his backpack. To be honest, it was making me mad, and I even took a couple of steps closer to the guy. This didn't stop him. He didn't even seem to notice me. He pulled a couple of more things off the shelf and stole them as well. That's when I decided to talk to him. I entered the aisle and said that he shouldn't put things in his backpack. He looked at me. He didn't look surprised, and he didn't try to hide it either. He just told me that I should mind my own business and leave him alone. I told him that there were cameras everywhere, and Target probably saw everything that he did. The guy just told me to shut up and then walked angrily away. I went back and found a Target employee and let them know about him. After that, I went back to my shopping. The rest of it only took me about 5 or 10 more minutes, and I didn't really have that much stuff to get. I didn't see the guy at all the rest of the time that I was in the store. I kind of assumed that Target had known what he was doing and was either talking to him or the police were called. Either way, I knew I did what I could to help out. I checked out and left the store. I got into my car and began to drive off. Right when I was leaving the parking lot, that's when I saw an older, beat-up looking small black car come speeding out of nowhere through the lot. At this Target, the parking lot was pretty big, and there were other businesses that were in the same shopping area with their properties connected. The car appeared to come out of one of these parking lots and drove straight towards my car. I had to slam on my brakes and swerve a little bit to avoid making contact with him. Then the car slammed on its brakes as well, just before we nearly collided. My car was basically blocked between the curb and the other car. That's when I looked up, wondering what idiot had just nearly ran into me. Then I saw the driver, and it was the same man who had been shoplifting inside of Target. He was now looking at me through the front windshield of his car, no doubt mad at me for getting involved in his shoplifting experience.
He flipped me the bird as we both sat there. I wanted to drive away, but his car was only about 2 feet away from mine, and behind me was the curb. Both of our cars sat there for probably 30 seconds. It was really uncomfortable with the guy staring right into my window the entire time. Then the man opened up his driver's door and began walking over to my car. I knew that I didn't have a choice anymore. I put my car into reverse and slammed my foot on the pedal. I did not have four-wheel drive, but my car somehow hopped up onto the curb, and when I had enough space, I put it back into drive. Then I turned and drove away from the guy. I saw him running back to his car, but I was already speeding away and out of the parking lot. I made it back onto the street, and somehow I wasn't followed. I'm not sure if the guy got away with shoplifting those items or what, but he was already outside and waiting for me when I left. Hopefully I never see him again. One of the scariest moments of my life happened when I went to Target last year. I went there one night to do some normal grocery shopping. There's a Target not that far at all from where I live, and I go there almost weekly. So I got there sometime at night, and I don't recall exactly when. I went inside, got a cart, and then started getting my items. I was inside of the store probably for about 20 minutes shopping at least. Then I finally checked out and left the store. I headed back to my car, which I had parked not even that far away. But when I arrived at my vehicle, which is a pretty normal sedan, something happened. I was behind it and about to go around and put the groceries in the back seat. That's when I saw somebody looking at me through the back window from inside my car. It was a man, and I didn't see him well at all because he ducked down less than a second after I saw him. I freaked out and left the cart there and went running back inside of the Target. After making it back inside, I dialed 911 to call the police. I told them that somebody was inside my car at the Target. Then I waited inside the store for the police to arrive. It took probably less than 5 minutes for them to get there, but in the meantime, when I was waiting, I was standing just a little ways inside of the Target near the first aisle. As I was waiting for the police, I was sure that I saw the guy that was in my car enter the store. He immediately walked to the right and didn't appear to notice me. I wasn't 100% sure, because like I said, I only saw him for probably less than a second inside my car window, but I was probably about 80% sure. I went down one of the aisles in case he was looking for me or something. A short time later, the police arrived. I went out of the store with them and we checked my vehicle. Whoever was inside of it was now gone, but my doors were all unlocked. I must have somehow forgot to lock them when I went inside of Target. I didn't have anything inside my car worth stealing though. I usually kept it pretty empty and clean. Still, what was a random man doing inside of my car? I had never seen him before. I gave his description to the police, and I also let them know that I thought I saw him inside Target. I made it clear that I wasn't 100% sure, but I was pretty certain that it was him, and it made me think that it was more likely to be him after knowing he wasn't in my car anymore. The man had dark hair, was sort of short, and wearing a tan t-shirt and jeans. He also appeared to be pretty young, in probably his 20s or maybe early 30s. The police told me that they would go into Target and see if he was still there. I stayed by my car talking to another officer for maybe 5 or 10 more minutes. Another officer said they did not locate the man inside Target and figured that he must have left. They said they would take one more look around the store and I could go home if I wanted to. At that point, I finally left to drive home. Now, the Target that I go to is near a lot of other stores, but the way that I exit is I drive down the road to the side of Target. Then I go down this quiet road that leads to more stores about a quarter mile down the road. When I was driving down that road, I saw this guy randomly walking alongside of it. It was weird because there was no sidewalk there and it wasn't very well lit, so you wouldn't really expect people to walk along it. Just seconds later is when I realized that it was the same guy. As I was approaching him, he turned and saw me. That's when he bolted out onto the street suddenly. It was like he was running towards me, and I veered to the right to avoid him. I wasn't going very fast, but luckily he didn't get to me, and I was able to successfully get around him. Then I sped away from him as he stood in the road. No other cars were nearby, and I got out my phone and called the police to report the guy. After that, I was finally able to make it back home okay. Looking back, I still can't believe that it happened. I avoided that Target for weeks after the events. Finally, I was able to go back, and I still shop there sometimes. Nothing like that has happened, and I haven't seen the guy either. I'm hoping that whoever he was, the police found him, or he stopped his wild behavior.
I shop at Target quite a bit. One day, I was doing my weekly grocery shopping. It was a Saturday and about 11 o'clock in the morning. The store was pretty busy as it was a weekend, but despite all the people, I noticed a man that seemed to always be in the same aisle as me. It seemed like just a coincidence, and I continued shopping. But every aisle I went down, he would appear at the end of it soon after. I tried to ignore it, and finally I finished my shopping and headed to the checkouts. I got in line to check out, and after about 30 seconds, the man appeared from the clothing section and got in line behind me. He looked to be in his 40s and had brown hair and a medium build. I looked, and he only appeared to be buying one thing, which was a bottle of water. I was really disturbed by that, after I know he had been following me around the entire store. After I checked out, I got my stuff and walked very quickly out the doors. I turned around and saw the man looking at me as I walked out the door. I walked to my car as fast as I could and put in the bags. I looked around and didn't see the man, so I got in my car and drove away. About 5 minutes into the drive, I turned off the highway and I saw a car turn off right behind me. I got a bad feeling and I looked in my mirror to see what appeared to be a man driving the car behind me. I couldn't see well enough to know for sure, so I took a turn at the next road just to be safe, and the car turned as well. At that point, I knew it had to be the same man that was following me. I took out my phone and looked up the nearest police station. It was about 12 minutes away, so I drove there. The man followed me all the way there every single turn until I pulled into the police station, and he kept going down the road. I stayed there for about an hour and finally went home. I made it home safe, but unfortunately, I didn't get his license plate. I just hope he didn't do that to anybody else. That was by far the scariest thing I ever experienced at Target.
When I was younger, I used to work at Target. One time, I was working the day before Christmas. Being one of the store managers, it was my job to close up for the night. Now, I've never had any other weird encounters besides the one I'm about to tell you. Keep in mind, this was a super Target, so just to get to one side took minutes. On this night, I was alone because the other employees had already left early to celebrate Christmas Eve with their families. As I walked through the empty aisles, fixing stuff and organizing displays, I started hearing these weird noises. At first, there was this faint rustling sound, like someone was moving things across the store on the other side. I stopped and tried to figure out where it was coming from, but the noise disappeared as quickly as it came. I thought maybe I was just imagining things because it was late and I was just extremely tired from my lack of sleep. But now I started to really overthink, and it felt like someone was watching me. I figured it was just my mind playing tricks, because the store being empty made everything feel a lot more creepy. Suddenly, out of nowhere, the intercom started to crackle, and it totally freaked me out. My heart sank, because it was at full volume. I couldn't make out what it was saying, but I thought I heard a voice. In a fast urge, I ran over to the nearest phone, and there it was, hanging off, so I hung it up. I assumed maybe it just fell and hit a button on the way down, but deep down inside, I was probably just lying to myself to not be as scared as I was. There was nothing that could convince me that this wasn't someone inside the store doing a prank, or one of those "we stayed at Target for 24 hours" videos for some clout on YouTube, as we have had in the rare occasion in the past. As I made my way through the toy section, something super weird caught my eye. The toys that were all neatly arranged before were now scattered on the floor, like some kid had been playing with them. I was confused, trying to come up with a logical explanation. Maybe it's just the potential pranksters that are in the store as we speak. I was sick and tired of all the jokes happening, and I just wanted to go home. This was making my night longer. So I started searching every corner for any sign of anyone that could be in the store with me. I called out, half expecting a group of friends to jump out and laugh at their successful prank, but the store stayed quiet. I started feeling frustrated because I couldn't make sense of all this crazy stuff. I thought about calling security or the police, but without any solid proof, it seemed pointless. This is the strangest part of the story. As I'm walking through the cereal aisle, I hear a loud buzzing and I see a flash going off behind a box of Fruity Pebbles. And it's a phone, and someone was calling it. I went to pick up the phone, but it dialed as the battery was on 1%. I got a glimpse of the background, but it was the standard Apple background, and it was a pretty old iPhone. At this point, I knew somebody had left this here on purpose to play with me, and this was an elaborate prank that was really thought out. I had searched every aisle in the store, so I thought to myself, maybe they snuck off into the back rooms as they were planning their next prank. So I went to check it out, and once again searching high and low in every spot, but still saw nothing. I sat down out of exhaustion, trying to catch my breath and my mind, and I started to think that maybe there wasn't anybody in the store with me at all. And then, in this really creepy moment, all of the lights in the store suddenly went out, and I couldn't see anything. I grabbed my phone as a flashlight, and without a second thought, ran for the main exit out of the back rooms. I made it out of the front door, and I didn't look back once, but I could have sworn there were footsteps running after me. At this point, there was no need to be skeptical. I had enough proof to call the cops and have them check out the store. I told them everything that went down, and they wasted no time showing up. They searched the place top to bottom, and they found these 4 teenagers hiding in the back, laughing their heads off. Turns out, they were pulling some messed up YouTube prank, trying to scare people after hours for their YouTube series. They were all underage, so I'm not sure what charges they got for their punishment. I used to work at Target as a cashier. I only worked there for about 6 months, and this was years ago. For the most part, it was a good job. My coworkers were nice, and most of the customers were nice as well. But there was one experience where that was not the case. I don't recall exactly when this was. I think I had been working at the Target for a while though. So I was working and people would come into my line to check out. At one point, this woman entered my line. She appeared to be maybe in her 40s and seemed a little bit off from the start. First of all, she was not buying anything but wanted to return something. I think it was olive oil, but it was a Great Value brand product. For those that don't know, Great Value brand is Walmart's off-brand and would never be sold at Target. I told her right away that I could not take it as a return. She got really angry and said why, and said that it was unopened and stuff, which it was. But I said it was Great Value brand and we didn't sell that here. The woman claimed that she bought it here at Target. I tried telling her again and said that this wasn't even the right place to make returns. I told her customer service is where you make returns at. She said they wouldn't take it or something, which makes me wonder why she thought I would. I told her no again, but she only got more and more angry. She started yelling at me, and by this point, other people in the checkout line just started walking away. After probably a minute or so of her just yelling at me, one of the managers noticed and came over to us. She asked what was going on, and the woman pretty much started yelling at her too. My manager started saying basically the same stuff that I had said. I really couldn't believe how this woman would not seem to understand. She finally stopped arguing. Then she went to those drink refrigerators that they have at the end of every check lane. She went in there and got a drink, and then proceeded to shake it up and walk back over to me. She then opened it and started spraying it at me and my manager. It was a soda, so it went everywhere. Then she tossed it to the floor and went back and got another. We were taken by surprise, and the woman quickly grabbed another drink and started shaking it up. She opened this one too, and my manager and I pretty much ran away from her then. We couldn't fight her or anything like that. The Target security guard went over to try to get the woman to leave, but the security guards are not real cops or anything. The woman did eventually end up storming off a while later after more yelling and cursing. The cops got called, and the woman was banned from the store forever. Other than that, my time working at Target was pretty good.